People didn't question much. There were very detailed records in ancient books. In the writings left by various scholars, they also mention this powerful and magical bow and arrow. It was not just Captain Dong who was on board, even Sun Quan, Cao Meng, etc. were very excited. After the tall general wandered around the prison, he took away 500 people. The jailers naturally did not dare to stop them. The tall general led the 500 scholars and swaggered out of the prison. After the departure, a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I didn't expect the plan to go so well this time. In a nearby tea house, on the 3rd floor, a handsome and dashing young man looked this way. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Captain Dong has never paid much attention to scholars." Besides, there was another fair-skinned young man sitting there. Take a good look and yet it could be found. There was no Adam's apple in this young man's throat, but it was a woman dressed as a man. Unfortunately. The gallant young man sighed, "We can only transport back 500 people this time, and it will be difficult next time. These 500 people are all carefully selected scholars and these 500 people are enough." The woman dressed as a man smiled faintly. On the street, the tall general escorted 500 scholars and walked for a while. Suddenly, they turned into a small alley with no people. A dozen spacious carriages had already been parked there in advance. "Let's put up with it and squeeze." The tall general spoke up and let 500 scholars squeeze into these carriages. Soon, the carriages drove out of the alley. Stepping out onto the street, it went to the city gate. The defense of the city gate was still relatively tight. But that day, the general guarding the gate seemed to know the tall general. What's more, there was a token in the hands of the tall general. So, the carriage was also not inspected. They went all the way through without a hitch. After leaving the city gates, the tall general just sighed in relief. He did not dare to be careless and let the carriage move fast. They were heading north in the direction of Guangzhong. Suddenly, a group of soldiers appeared ahead. There were about 500 soldiers in this group. Each one had a weapon in his hand. They seemed to have been waiting for them for a long time. The tall general was shocked. He only had less than 100 soldiers with him. The gallant young men and women disguised as men followed on horseback and hastily followed up. "Where are the soldiers ahead?" the heroic young man asked. "I don't know, it doesn't seem to be from Captain Dong, but in this region who can dispatch so many troops?" The tall general was puzzled. Speaking of which, this team of 500 people was already coming at them. "Run separately." The gallant young man gritted his teeth but still calmly made the best choice. More than a dozen carriages scattered in all directions, but still, 10 of them were stopped and forcibly taken away by 500 soldiers. The hands of the heroic young man clenched but didn't dare to chase them. "Brother Schwen, can you figure out who these people are?" The heroic young man turned to the woman dressed as a man next to him. Naturally, he had already seen that the other party was disguised as a man, but it wasn't revealed either. The woman's surname was Shi. A single-word name. She was a descendant of an ancient school. She was good at inferring secrets. Like this jailbreak. It was Shi Xuan who planned it. Everything was going well. Who would have expected that on the way, a group of 500 soldiers would attack? It almost completely ruined the plan. A woman named Shi Xuan who disguised herself as a man gently pinched her fingers. After a few moments, his brows suddenly furrowed tightly. A look of shock flashed in his eyes and he said, "I can't predict the origins of these people at all. How is this possible?" The heroic young man was also shocked. Shi Xuan was a real genius. Even if it was something more complicated than that, all of it could be easily deduced. These were 500 soldiers and yet they were completely unpredictable. "This matter is quite bizarre, perhaps there is something I am not aware of." Shi Xuan said solemnly, "Young Master Li, don't be in a hurry, first find a way to rescue other scholars. That's all that can be done." The gallant young man sighed. Strange, strange. After the heroic young man walked away, Shi Xuan muttered to himself with a puzzled look on his face. "This matter is the key to helping young Master Li compete for the world. I calculated it for a year in advance, but it turned out that Something unexpected happened. Shi Xuan thought inwardly. The more she thought about it, the worse it got. The young man was from a large clan in Guangzhong, the second direct descendant of the Li family. His name was Li Er. In this era, one or two of these words were very honorable. It was not easy to be taken as a name. Li dared to give this name to the descendants of his children. It was also because of the guidance of a senior person. As compared with the rising Cao Meng, Xia De and others, Li Er was now just an insignificant son of a large family. However, the leader behind Shi Xuan believed that there was an aura of nobility in this man. In the future, he would be most likely a latent dragon. He would be able to compete for the world. Then he sent Shi Xuan out of the mountain to help Li Er. The first mission was to rescue a group of scholars from the prison. For this purpose, Shi Xuan had made careful preparations. Everything was going well, but how could he not expect that in the middle of the way a mysterious army of unknown origin would attack them? They robbed most of the scholars. This army of 500 people was the Great Desolate Army sent by Yan. John Denver did not participate in this plan. But Yan formulated it by the positioning function of the white token. That white token could not only open the gate of the royal tomb, but it could also locate the location of those black tokens. Those black tokens were not just in the hands of the people of the Great Desolate Army. The Transcendental Research Team, which had received no small amount of credit, also got it. In this group of 500 scholars, many were the descendants of those scholars back then. They were wearing these tokens on their bodies. Come on, get off. After reaching the Royal Tomb Mountains, the black-faced man opened his mouth to speak and let the 400 scholars on the carriage speak. Out of a dozen carriages, the black-faced man led the hijacking of 10 carriages. A few others went too far, so he had to give up. A group of scholars stepped out of the carriage. As they saw the Royal Tombs Mountains in front of them, they were directly frozen. They also guessed which force hijacked them. Cao Meng Xia De Sun Quan from the east side of the desolate river. Or maybe it's the one in the southeast whose fame was growing, Zhu Changba. These heroic figures came to many scholars' minds, but no one expected that they would come to such a place. All of you, be good and go in. The black-faced man carried a whip in his hand and sneered, "If anyone will disobey and dare to sneak out, then don't blame me for being rude." Threats with intimidation. 400 scholars were so frightened that they dared not complain anymore and walked in obediently. They went in a temporary tent made especially for them. After just one night's rest, they were assigned various jobs the next day. The scholars who were placed in the firearms research room were the most numerous. These scholars walked into the research rooms one by one and were surprised to find out that the place was small, but it had everything. They couldn't believe that there were research labs for every discipline. In addition, the associated equipment was basic, but it was perfect. It did not look like the crude defensive troops could do it. Gradually, 400 scholars discovered that the black-faced general there was fierce, but it seemed like he never whipped them. Not only did he give them 3 meals a day. Every meal was very good. Equipment and materials for various experimental studies were also slowly being added. There was no one else either because the research was slow or did not produce results. No one scolded and beat them. Many scholars began to think to themselves, if it could be like this for a long time. It didn't seem like it was unacceptable to stay in this desolate place. With a host of scholars on board, Yan's research was more like a fish out of water. She was not very proficient in the field of chemistry, but her overwhelming talent allowed her to be acutely aware of problems that others hardly noticed. For example, flintlock rifles. Yan found that this kind of gun's drawbacks was not small. It could also continue to improve under the guidance of Yan. The results of the firearms research laboratory continued to emerge. Not long after, the shotgun that was first born on Zhu Changba's side was also developed there. A shotgun was a firing device that could be fired in the position where the charge was fired. Putting the fire cap on the anvil with the fire door. The gunpowder in the chamber was ignited by striking the fire cap. This was the firing mechanism. A gun with such a firing mechanism was called a firing gun. While Xia Kingdom's new firearms development activities were in full swing. On the opposite shore of the ocean, on the second continent, the water droplet people also slowly established their own civilization and initially planted their own technology tree. Unlike humans, there was no long primitive era for the droplet people. Their unique way of communication and transmission made them the first technological civilization. There was nothing metaphysical or superstitious. This time, the second continent was in the midst of a new battle for domination. After the giant eel ruled the land for decades, it still could not resist the laws of nature. It was gradually getting old, and other creatures that secretly coveted the status of the giant eel slowly started to show their head. They were carefully and constantly challenging the majestic giant eel. Click. In the forest, there was a large bear species. Their one bite could break the neck of a saber-toothed tiger. This immense and unbelievable bear was also a beneficiary of the red flower incident that year. Its current body shape became extremely scary. The whole appearance was the same as the original brown bear. There was a clear difference. John Denver gave this new giant bear a name, Tyrant Bear. A very grumpy giant bear. This tyrant bear was one of the giant eel's challengers. In the woods near where the tyrant bear killed the saber-toothed tiger, there were a few water droplet people hiding. Their whole body was translucent. They hid quietly in the shadows and observed the scene without moving. After a period of hiding inside the pyramid, water droplet people finally walked out. They came to the Great Plain where all things compete. In addition, with the products of their first generation of technology, the water droplet people communicated through brain waves. That made it very easy and convenient for them to communicate. Basically, there was no misunderstanding. A couple of droplet people hiding in the woods didn't need to face each other. They could communicate through the brain waves. They exchanged information with each other, silently. The huge tyrant bear didn't even notice. Only the owner of this planet, John Denver, knew what information these water droplet people were exchanging. They were hiding there. It was to hunt wild animals, but they didn't expect that they actually met a saber-toothed tiger as well as a gigantic tyrant bear. A water droplet man wanted to make a move. He wanted to attack the bear that seemed to be off guard, but the other droplet man stopped him. Such a large tyrant bear was not something they couldn't handle right now. After killing the saber-toothed tiger, the tyrant bear roared a few times and left. Several droplet people continued to hide. After waiting for about an hour, a big bamboo rat jumped in. This giant bamboo rat was more than twice the size of an ordinary bamboo rat. Due to the special environment of the second continent, the animals living there were also even bigger than that of the first continent. Seeing this big bamboo rat, a few water droplet people couldn't help but cheer up. They hadn't eaten meat for several days. This forest was too dangerous. There were many large predators. Even if it was herbivorous, it was also very large. It was simply not something they couldn't handle anymore. A water droplet man took out a thumb-sized water droplet man from his body. That's right. It was the water droplet man. A crystal clear water droplet. John Denver carefully viewed that. As the owner of the planet, he had the highest authority. On the planet, none of them could be hidden from his perception. Look left and look right. This was indeed just a real drop of water. In the next moment, this water droplet man exerted force on this water drop. He threw it out. The target was none other than the large bamboo rat. What made John Denver a little surprised was that this water drop was thrown into the air. It actually started to accelerate. In a very short time, it became fast. The sound of breaking wind could be heard. The big bamboo rat glanced that way and ran away immediately, but it could not run faster than the speed of this water drop. The water drop at this time already exceeded the speed of 200 meters per second. John Denver made a visual observation. This was not something that could be thrown by human hands at all. The head of a large bamboo rat was directly pierced by the water drop. It was killed on the spot. Seeing the dead bamboo rat, there were no excited expressions on the faces of water droplet people. Instead, they seemed to be a little unhappy. John Denver couldn't help but guess. These water droplet people were dissatisfied with the power of the water drop. This kind of water drop could accelerate on its own. John Denver felt a little curious. He began to look at the details of the water drop. He was surprised to find out that the raw material was indeed water. But the internal structure was destroyed. Or rather, reshaped. So this drop of water could only be activated by an initial force and would continue to accelerate. This structure was destroyed, and reshaped, by these water droplet people. John Denver was puzzled. If it was true, that would be a bit outrageous, wouldn't it? The water droplet people who were just recently born that powerful. John Denver's eyes moved to the residence of the water droplet people, on the largest pyramid of light. This was the only kind of shelter that the water droplet people currently had. All water droplet people lived within the pyramid of light. Inside the valley, only 3 pyramids of light had been built. Each of them housed several hundred water droplet people. The population of water droplet people was not growing as fast as humans. Among them, the largest one was the place where the chief of the water droplet people lived. The water droplet people were in strict order. The people below had no intention of resisting. The structure of civilization was relatively solid. In this pyramid of light, John Denver saw that everyone was holding buckets of water. It was placed in a corner of the pyramid with a specific structure. After about a week or so, these buckets of water would start coalescing a drop of a thumb-sized water droplet. The internal structure of these water droplets had been reshaped. John Denver only understood at this time. It turned out that the water droplets were made by this pyramid of light. This kind of pyramid and the pyramids of the earth in his previous life were roughly similar. In certain details it was different. The pyramid of light hangs with a trace of magic. But John Denver also knew that making such pyramids was a talent of the water droplet people. Just like humans were good at growing vegetables, the first generation of water droplet weapons was nothing too powerful. John Denver had a hint of expectation in his heart. The special inheritance method of the water droplet people made their technological civilization not cut off easily. In addition, as long as there was enough time, it could be passed down from generation to generation. The level of technology would get higher and higher. Unlike humans, the middle may be due to factors such as war. Today the Xia Kingdom had such momentum. However, with John Denver's interference, this possibility was almost non-existent. Accompanying Yan to the Royal Tomb Mountains and after robbing 400 scholars, another force with potential was quietly rising. The situation in the whole world was also getting messy. At the same time, a famous scholar appeared in the capital. This scholar was a woman called Xia. It was the same woman who was disguised as a man beside Li Er. With her outstanding appearance and sharp words, she became the guest of honor at the major mansions, in a short time. Many people took pride in meeting Xia. With the constant visits of Xia, Captain Dong, who was still immersed in the pain of losing his son, didn't notice it. Some people's attitude towards him changed. In addition to Xia, there was another thing that had also triggered the attention of the forces. That was an unknown prince named Shu. Suddenly one day, on the grounds of building a tomb for Captain Dong's ill son, Prince Shu led people modestly and took away 500 scholars from the prison of the Ministry of Punishment. Between times, it had received a lot of attention. Even there were many old ministers whose hearts were still thinking about the Xia Kingdom. They took the initiative to come to the door. With that, the people of the Ministry of Justice found out that a few scholars went missing from those scholars who were imprisoned. Of course, not really missing in the sense of being missing. Within a few days, someone would pay a lot of money to redeem one or several scholars. Since Captain Dong did not care about this, plus the other party gave too much money, officials of the Ministry of Justice also turned a blind eye to it. These redeemed scholars were coincidentally sent to the northwest, southwest and east of the desolate river. It was just that, halfway through, the escorting team was intercepted. The leader of the interceptors was a black-faced man called Chang Yu-chun. Thus the scholars who were redeemed by various forces at great expense, were laughed at by the great desolate army. The angry Cao Meng and Xia De jumped straight on the spot. In the east of the desolate river area, Sun Quan had been restless in those days. Because he was waiting for the best time to strike. Flintlock rifles and cannons were ready to be fired. 3,000 elite soldiers were also in place, but there were many native people in Jiangdong. Except for the clan of Sun Quan, the other three were relatively large. The natives predominantly had a universal army. These three ethnic groups, each one had over 3,000 people. Even if Sun Quan had sharp firearms, he had no clue in his heart. In addition, they were still very good to each other. The union had been in place for several generations. My lord, if there is nothing unexpected, tomorrow is a good time for us to act. Lu Sun said, who was next to him. Sure enough. The next day. Because a few small clans killed people from the big clans. Of the three large clans, there were two big clan leaders who angrily attacked with a large number of soldiers. The rest of the big clans also sent some men to help. These daring little natives were arranged by Lu Sun. The purpose was to lure the snake out of the hole. They were waiting for the two big clans to go away. Sun Quan took a sharp breath and personally led a team of 3,000 people. He pounced on that remaining big clan as fast as possible. There were no surprises. In front of sharp flintlocks and cannons, no matter how brave the people of this great clan were, they were just cannon fodder. Sun Quan was not merciful. The people of this big family had been solved cleanly. After that, he took the team and rushed to a dense forest. The other two big clans who came back were ambushed there. The battle was very intense. Sun Quan prepared an ambush and had the advantage of weapons, but the two big clans were brave. The numbers were more dominant. Finally, after Sun Quan Fang paid for nearly half of the casualties, all 6,000 people from these two great clans were wiped out. So far, in Jiangdong, there was no longer a force to resist Sun Quan. Sun Quan also started to develop at full strength. At the same time when Sun Quan was busy dealing with the three major native clans. At the mansion, a young man came. It was said that there was a major invention that he wanted to present to Master Sun. The young man was named Wan Te, and his appearance was unremarkable. It was a two-word name, but his family had fallen. What kind of invention? The guard asked disdainfully. Those days, because of the importance Sun Quan placed on scholars, many people ran to the door, impersonating a scholar or pretending to be a relative or friend of a scholar. Some were even more excessive and directly said that they had invented some kind of powerful weapon and wanted to dedicate it to Sun Quan. These people were no exception, all were checked to be scammers. An amazing invention. This young man opened his eyes wide and said with an exaggerated face, "One day, I saw the lid of the kettle on my coal stove pop up on its own after the water boiled. I was instantly inspired. I found out later that after the water boils, the water vapor can actually make the water cover move. Ha ha, this is a remarkable discovery. If you use this thing on other objects, then you can." The young man named Wan Te kept talking. He was not the least bit conscious. All right. The guard interrupted Wan Te and took out a few coins from his body and threw them on the ground saying, "Take these and do something practical, don't daydream." Looking at the coins, Wan Te was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He jumped up on the spot and said, "Humph, you actually dare to look down on me. If you don't want me here, then I'll take care of you. We'll see. You will regret it in the future." Wan Te quickly picked up the coins. Then he went away. He left Jiangdong. The next location was southwest. I heard that Xia in the southwest region is benevolent, righteous and virtuous, and he has always convinced people with virtue. He should be able to appreciate my invention. Sitting on the boat, Wen Te thought secretly. At that time, no one expected that the first technological frenzy on the Blue Star would start with this one little discovery. In front of the Royal Tomb Gate, Yan took out the white token and opened this gate again. This time, the preparations were made, so she could go right in. 200 scholars were standing behind her. Everyone looked excited. Why 200? Because these scholars were the first to be screened out and they were more trustworthy. The loyalty of the other 200 was yet to be tested. Yan took the lead and stepped in. The group of scholars followed carefully. As compared to the great desolate army that guarded the tomb, these scholars knew much more. According to the rumors left by the three colleges, people from the three colleges once followed the gods to fight, using their own wisdom and technology. Under the guidance of the gods, they defeated one alien race after another. But this rumor was becoming less and less believed with the passage of time. As scholars, it was also easy to convince them of one thing, which was to get the evidence. This rumor was nothing except for the few words and less obvious records in some books. It only came by words from generation to generation. There was no evidence. The passageway was spacious. There were so many people but none of them dared to make a sound. Only the sound of footsteps resounded clearly in the passageway. After walking for a while, their eyes opened up. A wide hall appeared in front of them. When Yan and 200 scholars saw the scene in this hall, there was a shocked look on their faces. Each one of them was stunned. They saw that there were transparent crystal coffins. Inside the crystal coffins, there were the corpses of men. These people were very tall, and in addition to people, there were other unknown creatures. Some of them had very strange shapes. For example, very creepy-looking creatures. A creature was looking like a large dwarf ball. A tall beast was covered with thick fur all over its body, with a pair of sharp fangs in its mouth, like a lion. This scene had completely overturned their understanding. They couldn't believe their own eyes. Is this the alien race that my ancestors followed the father and killed back then? Yan was prepared. After a brief shock, she vaguely guessed the truth. Snap! A voice sounded. Yan turned her head to look. A very old white-haired scholar was excited. He knelt down. Tears continued to flow from the sockets of his eyes. It dripped onto the ground along with the wrinkles. Teacher! This white-haired scholar looked at the creature in the crystal coffin in front of him and trembled. Did you see it? What you guessed is true. That year, our faction. Indeed, he followed the gods to heaven. Beheaded many alien races. It's the best evidence. It was not just this old man with white hair, many older scholars were all very excited. Their hands were trembling. Young scholars were also all shocked and excited. Even if some of them didn't believe the rumors, this scene in front of them was enough to dispel any doubts because none of these creatures existed in this world. Seeing this, a flash of memory flashed in John Denver's eyes. Since the age of Qi, hundreds of years have passed on the Blue Star, but for John Denver, it has just been less than a month. When Han was on his deathbed, he knew that there should be no more planetary conquest. He disbanded the Transcendent Research Institute. All items and information were all moved to this side of the royal tomb. After that, it was sealed. In addition to the corpses of these transcendent creatures. In the hall, there were other precious things. This is the legendary vibranium. A scholar threw himself in front of a crystal box containing some kind of metallic mineral, and a flash of excitement flashed in his eyes. Others also noticed this. Vibranium, is that true? No wonder Captain Dong has not been able to find it, it is hidden here. One by one, the scholars were all surprised and curious. For a magical metal like vibranium, there were more detailed records in the book, but all the vibranium that was left from that year was also sealed here by Han. There was not much vibranium left at that time. There was only one small box. However, in the age of Han, People had been sent to find vibranium. Several vibranium mines had been discovered. He sealed up the information of those mines and placed them here in the royal tomb. Han was not as smart as Chi, but he also vaguely guessed. He guessed that in the future, Father would surely return to the Blue Star and would lead the people of Xia Kingdom to fight again. What he didn't anticipate was this. The Xia Kingdom had gone from heyday to decline in just 100 years. If there was no birth of Yan, a demon-level genius, without John Denver's intervention, the fall of the Xia Kingdom was only a matter of time. The opening of the royal tomb, especially the discovery of all kinds of transcendent things inside, made the blood of 200 scholars excited and trembling. They all lost enthusiasm for their field. Their whole idea was that they wanted to study these unknown creatures, but Yan refused. These transcendental creatures had been dissected very clearly by scholars as early as the era of Qi. Related information was also sealed in the royal tomb. Yan did not make that information public. From that moment on, the team spirit of all scholars had undergone subtle and irreversible changes. Each one had a bright light in its eyes. There was a tacit understanding that people did not discuss with each other, but it was clear. They were all thinking about something. The other 200 scholars who didn't get in. What's wrong with you guys? A trip to the royal tomb. After coming back, they seemed to be different. The excitement passed and life had to go on. As the funds were insufficient, Yan formed several tough teams to overcome the most important projects. The advent of the shotgun. The elimination of flintlock was only a matter of time. But the shotgun wasn't perfect either. Since the invention of firearms, early firearms had always been front-loading muskets. That was, the gunpowder and the projectile were loaded from the front end, and there was no rifling inside the gun. The same was true for shotguns. The internal structure was simple. The projectile and the chamber were poorly sealed. The projectile and gunpowder must be tightly squeezed with the gun bar before it could be fired. Under the full force of the firearms team. Soon, some scholars invented the linear rifled gun. That was, the rifling was added inside so that the projectile could be more realistic in the gun chamber. It greatly enhanced the thrust of the gunpowder explosion. This rifled gun was far more accurate than conventional guns. But the rifle still had a major flaw. That was, the ammunition still had to be loaded from the front end. Extremely time-consuming. This time, someone came up with an idea. Since it was time-consuming to load from the front end, then, how about loading from the back end? Once this idea was proposed, it was immediately approved by Yan. The rear loading type thus went into high-speed development. And at the same time, northwest, southwest and east of the river. For the development of firearms. Still stuck on the further improvement of the flintlock rifle. The development of rear-loading guns was not so smooth. Failure was a regular thing. Yan presided over the overall situation, while continuing to do her own research and learning. Despite her intelligence, she was just a teenage girl. A lot of knowledge had not been learned. There were 400 scholars here. Each one of them was someone that Yan could learn from. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye. Another year passed. Yan was 14 years old. The rear-loading gun was still not manufactured. However, it had slowly taken shape, giving more hope. This year, a lot of things happened in the capital. Captain Dong formally proposed marriage to the royal family. But before the royal family agreed, the bad news came. The sickly consumptive son of Captain Dong died of a stroke on the collapse. No matter how one looked at it, it was not normal. Captain Dong was sad and angry. He mobilized the power of the whole city, searching for the killer. But he couldn't find it. The thing was that the leader of the great desolate army, the black-faced man Chang Yu-chun, personally led his people to do it. At this time, Yan was in Chang Yu-chun's heart. She was the walking of God in the world. representing the will of the gods. How could she be blasphemed by mortals like him? After the death of the only first son, Captain Dong paid more attention to his adopted son, Lu Shanfeng. And Captain Dong's temper also became more violent. Moody. It was gradually becoming unbearable for the people under him. Something subtle was going on. Sun Quan in Jiangdong is a little anxious. Next to the southeastern Great Lake, Lu Tianji and Zhu Changba were looking at the lake and were discussing matters. The center of the conversation was naturally this world's great power. There were two major powers that had attracted the most attention in the Xia Kingdom recently. One was Sun Quan from Jiangdong, who had the thunderous force. He destroyed the three most powerful native clans and cleared the biggest obstacle to the unification of Jiangdong, but it also took a significant number of casualties. No way, who would have thought that Cao Mang and Xia De would join forces? Lu Tianji smiled slightly, looked into the distance and said, "This defeat has greatly damaged Captain Dong's vitality, and he has also lost his deterrence against many forces." Sun Quan was so anxious. It was because, not long ago, another major event of even more significant concern took place. Among the many forces in the world, Cao Meng's territory in the northwest was closest to the capital. Captain Dong was aware of the threat. He dispatched Lu Shanfeng and mobilized 10,000 elite soldiers. The intention was to eliminate the threat of Cao Meng in one fell swoop. Cao Meng, who heard the news, assembled 5,000 soldiers with firearms. The two sides fought head-to-head on a plain. Halfway through the battle, a team of 5,000 people came out from behind. It was Xia De's reinforcements. Under the attack of the two teams of Cao Meng and Xia De, Lu Shanfeng was defeated. He hurriedly fled back to the capital with only 2,000 men left. This battle was shockingly rumored all over the world. After this battle, the situation of the entire Xia Kingdom also changed. After the loss of 8,000 elite soldiers, Captain Dong's military power no longer had an absolute advantage. Cao Meng and Xia De temporarily formed an alliance and became the biggest winner. Near the southwest of Jiangdong, the threat was faintly felt. So, Sun Quan accelerated the plan to unify Jiangdong to destroy the three major native clans in the capital city of the Xia Kingdom. The loss of this battle made Captain Dong, who was already grief-stricken by the loss of his son, even worse. He fell sick, right away. People were panicking about the bottom line. They started to have different thoughts. Inside the capital city, the undercurrent was more obvious. Everyone could see that even if Captain Dong recovered from this illness, he has lost his chance to be the best in the world. Logically speaking, in the battle with Cao Meng, there was a surprise attack by Xia De, but both sides had equal strength. There was also Lu Shanfeng, known as the first warrior of Xia Kingdom. He shouldn't have lost so badly. In fact, Captain Dong's team was still dominated by archers and cavalry, while the teams of Cao Meng and Xia De had been replaced with firearms and cannons. Even without Xia De's help, this battle was estimated that Lu Shanfeng would still lose with a high probability in the end. It was just a matter of how much to lose. This battle also let the many forces who were originally watching make up their minds. They were preparing to develop firearms vigorously. Bow and arrow or something. Outdated, huh? For the great desolate army, Captain Dong was seriously ill. The biggest benefit was that no one paid attention to the situation on the side of the Royal Tomb Mountains. Yan simply put people outside the capital. On the main road to the capital, she opened a recruitment hall. There were recruiting talents from all over the world. The trick worked pretty well. It recruited a lot of strange people and some talented people. The black-faced man, Chang Yu-chun, brought a man that day. Her Royal Highness, this person said that there is a major invention, and he must tell Her Highness in person. Chang Yu-chun reported. A major invention. Yan raised her eyebrows. Ever since the opening of the recruitment hall, this was the first time anyone had dared to say that. Let him in. Soon, a young man covered in filthy, torn clothes like a beggar, was brought in. Seeing Yan, his eyes lit up. "What great invention do you have, you can tell now." Yan looked at this beggar-like young man. It was not too much to ask. Some days ago, she received a lot of people with ordinary backgrounds, but they were very gifted and talented people. The young man cleared his throat and shouted, "My lord, I made a very crucial and significant discovery." There was a pause. In a sacred tone, this young man continued, "When I was boiling water, I was suddenly surprised to find out that after the water boiled, the water vapor was able to move the lid over the top. Think about it, my lord, it's just steam from a pot of water. If there was a bigger container, and more water, wouldn't the steam generated to be able to lift the roof up?" That's right, that young man was Wan Te. After being humiliated at Sun Quan's residence in Jiangdong, he ran off to Xiada in the southwest. But that time, Xiada was on his way to leading a team to help Cao Meng. Only an old butler received him. This time, only a coin was thrown to him. Wan Te was furious. "What Xiada, what a benevolent gentleman, it's total bullshit. A mere villain, how dare he look down on me." Wan Te cursed, "One day, you people will regret it. When the time comes, even if you kneel down and beg me, I won't agree to give you mercy." After venting for a while, Wan Te thought of today's world. The most powerful was Captain Dong. He went all the way north, by the roadside. He saw the recruiting hall. Thus he came over to see what was going on. Hearing Wan Te's exaggerated rhetoric, Yan's eyes gradually became serious. In her mind, she imagined the steam hitting the lid. After a while, Yan murmured to herself, "Convert mechanical energy into kinetic energy." "What can?" Wan Te listened in confusion. During this time, he also taught himself a little something. However, mechanical energy, kinetic energy, or something. He hadn't heard of it at all. Yan glanced at Wan Te, then said to Chang Yu-chun at the door, "Give him 10,000 pieces of silver and arrange for him to stay." 10,000 pieces of silver. Wan Te was slightly stunned. A reaction followed. Did she buy out this idea of mine? This groundbreaking idea is 10,000 silver and you want to buy out? You play beggars. Wan Te immediately shouted loudly and said, "No, how can 10,000 silver be enough? I want shares. For this epic-making invention, I must take half of the share." The words were not yet finished, Chang Yu-chun held him by the neck and pulled him out of the door. "Return shares, share." Yan was somewhat speechless. This young man's discovery was unusual, but it was just a discovery. It was like someone found iron balls of different weights falling on the ground at the same time. Could it be that the law of free fall was owned by this man? Besides, discovering the phenomenon called steam. This young man was certainly not the first person. Later that evening, in the residence of the recruitment hall, Wan Te made up a random excuse. He carried the 10,000 taels of silver that just arrived and ran away. Humph, 10,000 taels of silver to send beggars. Wan Te snorted, "Without 100,000 taels of silver, don't even think about buying it. If I am not appreciated here, there are bound to be people who appreciate me." Wan Te immediately thought of Captain Dong. At this time, Captain Dong was seriously ill. Such an epic-making discovery was definitely needed. He found a random place to sleep. Early next morning, Wan Te ran into the capital. He came to the residence of Captain Dong. On the weekdays before dawn, there were a lot of people lining up outside the Dong mansion. But at that time, it was desolate. There was not a single person. Wan Te waited around. Finally, a butler from Dong's house arrived. He immediately went up and told him the reason for his visit. "Fuck off. What steam, water vapor? Hurry up and get lost." He hadn't said a few words yet. The butler impatiently shouted at him. Wan Te was instantly enraged and shouted, "You know what I mean. This is an epic-making invention. Are you blind? The recruitment hall over there had offered me 10,000 taels of silver. 10,000 taels of silver. The butler immediately took another look at Wan Te. It was soon discovered that Wan Te was bulging with stuff. 10,000 taels of silver was not a small amount. After blowing Wan Te away, there was a gleam in the butler's eyes. Several people were immediately called in and quietly ordered. In the afternoon, someone noticed. In a remote gutter, there was a young man who fell in and seemed to drown. This kind of thing happened a lot in the capital. No one cared at all. Jan sighed. A new research team was formed. The STEAM research team. Wan Te's narration gave Yen a lot of inspiration. Her first thought was that steam could be used to replace the current water wheel to help irrigate water for farmland. All the people in the research team that was established were very interested in this thing. A word from the people presented more ideas. Some people thought they could use steam to push the wheel. Some people also thought that the steam could be used as a force for smelting metals, etc. In short, the discussion was very lively. As a specialist in physics, Yan personally led this team and invested a lot of money. After Captain Dong became seriously ill, the Great Desolate Army was starting to get bolder and bolder. For example, selling firearms. This was currently the main source of income for the Grand Desolate Army. It was about making firearms and selling them to various forces. In addition to the recognized heroes such as Captain Dong, Cao Meng, and Xia Da, there were still many local forces that were watching in the Xia Kingdom. It was like the great clans of each place, officials from each city, the generals of each army, etc. Some of them were ambitious and were watching, but without exception, all realized the importance of firearms. The demand for firearms was also growing more and more intense. The origin of firearms on Xia Da's side was the most famous, but Xia Da was tightly guarded against this. It was forbidden for any of the firearms to flow out. Yan saw the timing and started using the contacts of the Great Desolate Army and scholars to sell firearms in a big way. It was not just firearms, as long as you bid high, cannons were also negotiable. So, under the urgent needs of one force after another, the price of the firearms of the Great Desolate Army was very high. However, demand still exceeded supply. A scholar also proposed the concept of hunger sales. Only a little was sold every month that let the Great Desolate Army's firearms be hard to find. With adequate funding, Yan also started a plan to expand her staff. In addition to the recruiting hall, the expansion of the Great Desolate Army was also on the agenda. 1,000 people were temporarily increased. At the same time, the search for the token owner had also begun. In today's Royal Tombs Mountains, there were less than 5,000 people who had black tokens. While a total of 30,000 Great Desolate Army and thousands of scholars accepted the token given by John Denver at the cheese time. In other words, outside right now, there were at least 10,000 more token owners. Time passed slowly and various researches were slow, while some were going fast. 5 months after the STEAM team was established, with the joint efforts of the team, finally the first decent machine was born. This speed was considered very fast. After all, there was no prior foundation. In addition to the wisdom of Yan and a group of scholars, one of the other reasons was star meteorite iron. This metal was as amazing as vibranium. It was taking the place of iron ore. It became the most critical raw material for all kinds of equipment and items. It was extremely effective and the success rate was very high. The first steam machine was made by using a large amount of star meteorite iron. It quickly succeeded. This machine was called steam water lifter. The principle was not too complicated. When the steam machine was born, not only the research team, but other scholars also came to hear the news. They wanted to witness it with their own eyes. Such an epoch-making machine. This is the steam water lifting machine. A young scholar glanced at everyone, with a hint of pride in his eyes and explained loudly, "Look, this is an egg-shaped container. Firstly it is filled with steam and then close the steam inlet valve. A vacuum is created by spraying cold water outside the vessel to condense the steam inside the vessel. Open the inlet valve and the water outside is drawn into the container by atmospheric pressure through the inlet pipe. Then close the water inlet valve, reopen the steam inlet valve and rely on steam pressure to press the water out of the vessel through the drain valve. When the water in the container is emptied and filled with steam, close the steam inlet valve and the drain valve and respray water to condense the steam. It repeats itself like this. By working with two egg-shaped containers alternately, you can continuously drain the water. The onlookers nodded slightly as if they understood, unconsciously. John Denver also naturally saw this scene. Frankly speaking, this water lifting machine still had major flaws and shortcomings. It relied on the suction of the vacuum to draw water, but it could not draw water to a depth of more than 10 meters. It was not too practical. In addition, it was also very bulky. But the first steam machine was born. It was still a great encouragement to the research team. The improvement of the water lifter was more powerful. At the same time, it was not just a steam machine, it had also been more or less fruitful for research by other groups. What John Denver didn't expect was the mineral map left by Han. The prospecting team sent by Yun actually found a deposit of vibranium. The storage capacity of this vibranium deposit was not a small one. With a rough look, he just knew that it was not less than 10 tons. The prospecting team was very excited and sent someone to stay behind while picking up some vibranium. Some rushed back. Yan, who got the news, was also very excited. She was able to work out various complex theories, but there was no way to generate minerals. Especially vibranium. The legendary magical metal. Immediately it was tested, and by the results of this test, even John Denver was a little surprised. After a century of evolution, the vibranium produced by Blue Star seems to be upgraded. Vibranium found in the era of Qi was kind of amazing, but there was one weakness: it could only be used once. While encountering huge external energy after absorbing a certain amount of energy, it would automatically burn up. Turning into a pile of black charcoal, one could say that it was disposable. Resulting in the battle against Maya Harris's army of magicians. The magic attack destroyed almost all of the vibranium shields. The original 500 pounds of vibranium storage was almost used up. There was only a tiny amount of vibranium left. It was sealed and stored in the royal tomb, until today. Yan immediately had someone perform the experiment. The results of the experiments were quite surprising. Its performance was actually better than what was described in the books. At first, Yan thought it was not vibranium but another metal. However, the latter was compared with the sealed vibranium and discovered that it was the same kind of metal. This was very surprising. No one knew why. Could it be that after Blue Star evolved for over 100 years, vibranium followed suit and upgraded? John Denver couldn't help but have this guess in his heart. It was not just the storage capacity that had increased. In addition, its performance was also upgraded. As for the current vibranium, it could absorb more energy per gram. If made into a shield, the power of the energy that could be resisted was also greater. The discovery of the new vibranium made all scholars very happy. Originally, for this magical metal that was only recorded in books, people had a yearning for it. That was while following the gods and in the battle against alien races, it was a God-given metal. However, because the sealed vibranium was too little, Yan herself resisted the urge to experiment. The time had come. A new type of research team was quickly assembled, dedicated to the study of vibranium. Soon, a young scholar came up with a bold idea. Since both vibranium and star meteorite iron were so amazing, converge both of them together. What would happen when it was made into alloy? Once this idea was proposed, all of the scholars lit up. The thick fire of curiosity rose up. Yan was also very interested. Do what you say. The research team brought in equipment and raw materials. The journey of combined refining of vibranium and star meteorite iron started. This project was not possible for it to produce results in a short period of time. This time, another temporarily overlooked research group, Firearms Research Group produced a new test result. A more advanced gun than a shotgun was produced. The original shotgun was better than the flintlock gun, but there were still the consistent weaknesses of traditional guns. Ammo was a pain in the ass to load. In addition, every time you finish, one has to reload the ammo. It was tedious and troublesome. The new gun completely changed this situation at that time. It changed the structure of the original gun. The location of the ammunition was changed from the front to the back. This gun that loaded ammunition from the rear of the body barrel consisted of a body barrel, a gun mechanism, a firing mechanism and a stock. It fired paper-cased bullets. When in use, the shooter uses the bolt to push the bullet into the chamber from behind. After pulling the trigger, the long rod-shaped firing pin on the bolt pierces the paper cartridge case, hitting the primer and igniting the propellant. Followed by shooting the projectile out. When the gun was fired, the firing pin pierced the bottom of the paper cartridge to hit the primer. Some scholars called it a pinpoint firing gun. At the same time, as the bullets of this rear-loading gun needed to be loaded into the barrel one by one, most people called it a rear-loading single shotgun. Both parties had the right to this naming. There was a lot of bickering. In the end, with a pat on the back from Yan, this new gun was named Rifle. The birth of the rifle was a major change in the history of firearms development. It completely changed the original tactics of cueing shooting. It was known to future generations as the beginning of modern firearms. At least, there was a basic prototype. The initial rifle was still not quite perfect. Loading bullets still seemed to be more troublesome. After the research group was greatly performed by Yan, more power work on improving the rifle began again. This time, there was some disagreement in the group. Some people thought that the structure of the rifle was now largely approaching maturity. There was no need to continue improving. The direction should be put on the bullet. Some people remained the same, still continuing to improve the structure. The two sides did not get along well and were divided into two groups. Each of them led the research in their own direction. Yan saw this but also did not step in to coordinate as long as there were no irreconcilable conflicts. She just let these scholars play. She expected that maybe there would be unexpected gains. Time passed quickly. The alloy construction plan of vibranium and star meteorite was unexpectedly difficult. Even if it was a large investment of human and material resources, it was not possible to see results in the short term. In 1 year, almost nothing was achieved. This also made many scholars feel a little frustrated. Many people dropped out of the group, but there were many who still stayed. Yan had grown another year. Yan was initially grown up as she celebrated her 15th birthday. The growth and development of humans on the Blue Star were a little faster than in the previous life on Earth. According to the law, 16 was the age of adulthood. During this year, a lot happened in the Xia Kingdom as well as in the capital. Captain Dong fell ill and his physical condition was getting worse day by day. One by one, the people under the hand began to plot another way out. Among the descendants of the royal family, Prince Shu was starting to emerge. At several poetry meetings and banquets, he did it all perfectly. It left many people in awe. In addition, Captain Dong was seriously ill. Some ministers and wealthy families turned to Prince Shu. Inside the imperial palace, everyone's smiles seemed to be back. Every day, scholars went missing from the prison of the Ministry of Punishment. It was still sneaky. Along with Captain Dong's illness, the Ministry of Punishment's officials also did not bother to cover up. Each scholar was explicitly priced. Whoever gives more money could claim it. In addition, it was also very businesslike. An auction was held once a month for this. The people involved in the competition were Cao Meng, Xiada, Sun Quan and other parties recognized as lords. There were also Zhu Changba and Li Er, who were not well-known powerhouses. Emperor Shu also mixed in. The great desolate army naturally could not miss it. But in the prison, there were thousands of other scholars, so no one could take all of them. Yan drew up a list of names. Following the list of the auction list, not every scholar was a genius, or valuable. For now, Yan only needed scholars who were helpful for the current research. With the money from the sale of firearms, Yan also bought a lot of scholars that she wanted. Some were taken by others. If it was someone very talented, she let Chang Yu-chun lead the Great Desolate Army to take action to directly rob them halfway. Overall, in that year, in the Xia Kingdom, there were undercurrents, but the surface was still relatively calm. As the new year passed, a big war suddenly broke out. The two sides of this war were the two largest forces in the southeastern lakes. Chen Yiliang's side as well as Zhu Changba's side were the largest forces. Chen Yiliang was the force with the most troops in the southeast region. Many people also thought that they had the qualifications to compete in the world. Zhu Changba was much weaker. The two sides spread out in the lake and an intense water battle was fought. After 3 days and 3 nights of war, Zhu Changba severely damaged Chen Yiliang's fleet by relying on more advanced ships, sharper firearms and Lu Tianji's advice. They destroyed most of the opponent's main force. Chen Yiliang fled in a hurry. After this war, no one could stop Zhu Changba's footsteps anymore in the entire southeastern region. A new hero was rising. The captain is seriously ill, all of you, go back first. In front of Captain Dong's mansion, a group of ministers came to visit. They were all stopped by the cold-faced Lu Shanfeng in front of the mansion. The original Dong mansion was very cold, so no one came here. However, in the last few days, as the news spreaded that Captain Dong's condition was getting worse, every well-known minister came to visit. Humph! Watching these ministers leave, Lu Shanfeng could not help but grunt coldly. He was naturally clear about the intention of these people. It was just to see, was his adoptive father dying yet? Shanfeng, have you thought this through? Back in the courtyard, a figure appeared in front of Lu Shanfeng. This was a middle-aged man who looked very special. The name was Yuan Gang. It was Li Tang's powerful figure in Guanzhong. In Li Tang here, Li referred to the large clan Li, and Tang means, one of the largest sects in Guanzhong, the Tang sect. According to the rumors, Tang sect was founded by a retired scholar in the era of Qi. It had been in existence for hundreds of years. That year, it was famous for its mechanism. Beyond the 3 colleges, there were very few other places where scholars could be produced. The Tang sect was one of them. It is said that this Yuan Gang is not only proficient in mechanical studies, but also good at deducing heavenly secrets. He was once a fellow student of Lu Tianji in the southeast. Lu Shanfeng thought secretly. On the surface, he said nothing about that, and said, as a son of man, how can you have any dissent at this time these days? I will do my best to save my adopted father. Brother Gang doesn't need to say more. If that's the case, then I won't bother. Yuan Gang excused himself and left. Shortly after leaving the Dong house, he came to a tea house not far away. On the second floor of the tea house, there was a gallant young man and a fairy-like woman sitting. It was Li and Shi Xuan. How was it? Li asked. Yuan Gang shook his head and said, this Lu Shanfeng is of mediocre intelligence, but too ambitious. He turned me down. Hearing this, Li fell silent and Shi Xuan said, it seems that Lu Shanfeng has the heart to replace Captain Dong. The condition of Captain Dong is not optimistic at the moment, so it's not easy to convince Lu Shanfeng. Can we attack his men? Li asked at this time. A smile appeared on the corner of Yuan Gang's mouth, and he said, it is estimated that within 2 months, Captain Dong will surely return to heaven, and this man, Lu Shanfeng, is brave and reckless. There are many soldiers under his command who are loyal to him, so for now, we can only wait. Wait. Li was a little confused. Wait for Lu Shanfeng to make a mistake himself. Yuan Gang answered and said, Lu Shanfeng does not have the prestige of Captain Dong. He is only from the bottom, and there must be a lot of people who don't obey him. With the nature of Lu Shanfeng, when the time comes, there is bound to be a clash with these people. Let's just wait and see what happens. That's what you say. A look of concern flashed across Li Er's eyes as he said, but there should be quite a few people who think like us, and that Emperor Shu is probably thinking the same way. Hearing the words Emperor Shu, the expressions of the three of them became gloomy. The other side was rising a little too fast during this year. In addition, there was a natural advantage. That was his status as a prince. It could be said to be justifiable. Let the many ministers and big clans who were swaying gradually tend to be on the side of Prince Shu. In comparison, Li Er had no advantage. Prince Shu is not bad, but Yuan Gang smiled and said, he is famous and he has no power. In today's world, Cao Meng and Xiada, out of these people, which one doesn't have tens of thousands of troops? They would compete for the world in the end. It depends on absolute strength. In the Royal Tombs Mountains, the 1,000 newly recruited soldiers of the Great Desolate Army were being led by Chang Yuchun. They were conducting crazy training. It was stormy outside, but even scholars who were concentrating on their research work could feel it. Under this invisible pressure, everyone was more energetic. Rifle and bullet improvements were done. After a period of 5 months, another major breakthrough had been made. Metal bullets were invented. This was to take advantage of the material properties of star meteorite iron. The ammunition could be loaded inside the metal. Most of the previous problems were solved by this. Almost at the same time, the combined refining project of vibranium and star meteorite iron was also a breakthrough. A scholar accidentally added a little extra amount. Subsequently, he was surprised to find out that vibranium and star meteorite iron were actually well combined together. A whole new alloy was born. After a short period of excitement, everyone started to experiment non-stop. Yan put down her work and came to watch it in person. John Denver was also watching silently. This alloy inherited most of the performance of vibranium. At the test site, firstly, rifles were fired in unison. The target of the alignment was none other than the new alloy 100 meters away. After a few sounds, people saw that only tiny traces of bullet holes were left behind on the surface of the alloy. When it was hit by the bullet, the color on that spot of alloy slightly darkened. This got the crowd excited. The latter experiments continued. In the end, everyone found out that the most important feature of this new alloy was that it was hard. Very hard. Vibranium could still be cut with a knife in successive slashes, but this alloy could not be affected by the knife. Even the newly developed metal bullets only left a trail of traces only on the surface of it. It wasn't even obvious. Seeing this, John Denver's mind couldn't help but float up. An alloy seen in science fiction works in his previous life was also known for its hardness and strength, Edmund alloy. This new alloy was created using vibranium and star meteorite iron. The more John Denver looked at it, the more it looked like the sci-fi works that he had seen in his previous life. It was like a very special kind of metal, Edmund alloy. To be precise, Edmund alloy was made by a scientist by accident. It was made of foreign metals, iron, and vibranium. It was mixed into carbon alloy with the composition of extraterrestrial meteorites and formed an indestructible, very hard metal. According to the plot, once this Edmund ore has been melted and cooled, it still wouldn't show the slightest sign of melting, even in the heat of 50,000 degrees. It was a man-made indestructible alloy, not a natural one. Its chemical structure was top secret. It was not an element because it had properties that none of the elements in the periodic table had. It was very difficult to make. The cost was also very high. Wolverine's bones and weapon materials were made of this Edmund alloy. Of course, the performance was very similar. The nature of this new alloy was not as exaggerated as the Edmund alloy because ordinary bullets left some traces. To be precise, it should be the weakened version of Edmund alloy. John Denver pondered for a moment. On the test site, the testing of this new alloy was still going on. It was not just about shooting with bullets. To test its defensive power, there were also bows and arrows, swords, axes and other powerful cold weapons. Later, more powerful soldiers brought large hammers and smashed it hard. Naturally, these tests were not much different. After testing in more than a dozen ways, someone suggested another way. For example, fire attack, cold water, sulfuric acid corrosion, etc. The result remained unchanged. Even the flames and the strongest corrosive acids didn't affect it. After getting to this point, the scholars on the research team could finally determine that this alloy is extremely hard. It was much stronger as compared to vibranium. There was just one thing that left many scholars feeling imperfect. That was, the new alloy was missing the sound-absorbing property of vibranium. That was to say, it could no longer be used as an arrow or other weapon. As a shield, it was probably the best option. This made a lot of people feel sorry. No matter how good the defense was, it seemed to be almost meaningless. Why don't we change the amount of vibranium and star meteorite iron? Maybe it will produce an offensive alloy. A young scholar came up with an idea. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. They couldn't help but glance at the young scholar. "Kid, what a thoughtful idea." Immediately, a few people rushed into the laboratory and researched. This research didn't last long because of the first successful alloy. Half a month later, there was good news from the laboratory. The research on offensive alloy was successful. It attracted even more people. Most people prefer to attack. Who wants to be beaten passively? Although it was already the middle of the night when the results came out, everyone was in high spirits. Even Yan also crawled out from the blanket and watched this experiment with great interest. The first experiment was the suggestion of the young scholar from before, attacking the first alloy with the second alloy. To see how the sharpest spear could break through the hardest shield. Chang Yu-chun personally came to test it. The second alloy was made into arrows and bullets respectively. First, he used sound-absorbing arrows. He took this new type of arrow and shot at a shield made of the first alloy. Chang Yu-chun's arrows were still very accurate and hit right in the center of the shield. Everyone stretched their necks to look. The result was surprising, but not so surprising. This arrow was caught up in the shield, but it only penetrated a little. Chang Yu-chun continued the experiment with bullets. With a boom, the alloy bullet from the rifle hit the shield without any deviation. This time, it was more powerful than the arrow. The part that penetrated was deeper. The result was quite obvious. An offensive alloy made of vibranium and star meteorite iron was effective against defensive alloys, but the effect was not that obvious. If the era of Qi had star meteorite iron, the competition would have been easier in the first place. Seeing this, John Denver couldn't help but think. In the grand competition, only 2 matches were more intense. One was against Maya Harris and the other match was against Zara Ehrman. The casualties were not low in these matches. At that time, there was absolutely nothing they could do with 2 spirit tree people. They could only rely on a large amount of black powder to set a trap. In the end, the spirit tree people of Shu Ling were blasted to the sky. If the 2 alloys were present at the time, then, as long as the amount was sufficient, it was completely capable of exhausting the 500 Shu Ling and 2 spirit tree people. With the astonishing defensive power of the defensive alloy alone, the other side could hardly do anything to them. Next, other experiments were to be done as well. It was not as John Denver expected. Offensive alloy inherited the advantages of vibranium. It was able to absorb sound and energy and was used to make metal bullets. It could make the power of the bullet rise dramatically. The first thing that came to John Denver's mind was that it was a great tool for dealing with transcendence. As the experiment was over, a big problem came. What should be the name of this new alloy? A group of scholars began to quarrel fiercely again. In the end, it was still Yan who made the decision. The offensive alloy was named Star Vibration Alloy Type 1. The defensive alloy was named Star Vibration Alloy Type 2. It was not that good, but in the end, it was barely satisfactory. Yan immediately ordered the relevant information and equipment to be sealed up. This confused many people, but Chang Yu-chun and others understood. This alloy would be taken out against other armies. It was like killing a chicken with a knife. Now in the entire Xia Kingdom, only the side of the Great Desolate Army was equipped with metal bullets. Most of the other regions couldn't even research the shotgun, not to mention the amount of vibranium today was not that much. That vibranium mine had become top secret. Only a few people, such as Yan, knew about it. Time was like water, the situation of the world was tending to be stable, but with the illness and death of Captain Dong, it rippled up again. In the capital, there was no leader. Almost every day, each force was moving with each other. Prince Shu and Li appeared more and more frequently on various occasions. Even Cao Meng, Xia De and others who were far away also sent people over. Shortly after the funeral of Captain Dong, internal divisions began. Lu Shanfeng had a firm grasp on the unit with the largest number of troops. No one else could obey this man of commoner origin. The team had been led away or joined another force or formed an alliance or became independent. In short, Captain Dong, the most powerful force in the past, was already disintegrating. In the entire central region of the Xia Kingdom, a weird situation with no leader appeared. The one who benefited most from this situation was the royal family of the Xia Kingdom. The palace was filled with the long-lost laughter once again. It was also Yan's coming-of-age ceremony. The 3-year period of guarding the tomb was up. Yan also had to come back from a trip. My daughter has really grown up. Inside the palace, Yan's mother looked at her own daughter, who had emerged as a clear and beautiful woman. With a smile on her face, Yan didn't say anything. She was eating in silence. 3 years of life in the royal tombs mountains made Yan feel that there was no common thing to talk about. Her feelings were getting thinner and thinner, especially when she came into contact with John Denver. He let Yan open up to a whole new world. Fortunately, I didn't immediately agree to Dong's marriage, or else. Yan's mother rambled on. Again, this was the thing that she was most concerned about as a mother. Yeah. The palace maid next to her continued, with Her Highness' current appearance, the one who died, how could he be worthy? I wonder which kid will be cheap in the future. Yan didn't answer the question and kept eating. The palace maid and her mother looked at each other. The mother smiled, looked at Yan and said, Yan, there is a poetry party in the evening, and many young heroes will come. I heard that the second son of Li Tang from Guanzhong will also come. You can go and take a look. I just got back and I want to rest for a few days first. Yan coldly declined. She naturally knew exactly what her mother meant. She also figured out how to deal with it. In the next few days, guests kept coming. Most of them were concubines from other palaces. At the same time, they also brought princes and princesses. The attitude of these people towards Yan was quite polite. Not as distant as it was a few years ago. They also warmly invited Yan to some poetry meetings and parties. To everyone's great surprise, Yan refused all of them. Her attitude was still very tough. No one could persuade her. As a few more days passed, Yan received a message. After leaving the Royal Tombs Mountains, Chang Yu-chun directly dispatched a large troop of 500 people to secretly protect and watch Yan. There were only 20 to 30 guards on the surface. Yet there were several hundred of them. At the same time, they also planned to build a base in the capital. Amongst some guards and eunuchs in the palace, descendants of the Black Tokens were discovered. Naturally, they were also pulled in. On this day, Yan received the news in advance. A cabinet minister with a highly respected old eunuch prepared to come and discuss the marriage. This minister is the current real power faction, with deep connections and background, and is the target of many forces. At Yan's side, a female guard reported. That's right, for Yan, Chang Yu-chun specially recruited a group of female guards to come in. In this world, the defense of the opposite sex was not so strict. His son is also very good. Rumors say that the most favored one by the mother-in-law is the second son of Li Tang in Guangzhong, but if you have a good discussion with this minister, it may not be impossible. The lady guard didn't say anything further. In the upper class, children couldn't make their own decisions about marriage, especially the children of the royal family. It was still a parental order. Once the two sides agreed, the marriage was set up and handed over the marriage certificate to each other. Phew. Yan looked at the sky and let out a long breath. This time she didn't return only to visit her mother. Most importantly, she returned to solve such things because in the royal family, the marriage of every prince and princess was decided very early. Yan went to guard the tomb for 3 years and her current age was considered late. Be as gentle as possible. Yan instructed. Yes. The female guard accepted the order and left. Soon after that, the people in the palace received a shocking message. Cabinet ministers were on their way to the palace. There was an attack. The person was fine, but the shock was not small. The marriage was also naturally impossible to talk about. Mother, I would rather stay with you for the rest of my life than marry someone who is not capable of anything. Yan said this to her mother. Fine, fine, as you wish. Her mother still smiled and said, my daughter is so good looking, naturally she cannot marry someone who is not capable. Yan breathed a sigh of relief. John Denver, who was secretly watching, also smiled. Being forced to marry by parents could be said to be an irreconcilable natural contradiction. From ancient times to the present, there was no solution, either marry or don't marry. There was no third option. Yan could only resort to this temporary delay not to disappoint her mother. Hundreds of guards were mixed around. Whenever they found someone to propose marriage, they would use all kinds of means to make the other side know what to do. So it was New Year's Eve. The 3 families who came to discuss the marriage had various accidents between times and no one dared to try again. There were even rumors that Yan spent 3 years guarding the mausoleum in the Royal Tomb Mountains. There was an ominous breath on her. This rumor made Yan slightly relieved. The maximum delay is 2 years, in 2 years this matter must be completely resolved. Yan thought somewhat helplessly. Shortly after the year, Yan quickly returned to the Royal Tombs Mountains and continued to join the work of the research group. For the scholars, there was not much of a New Year atmosphere. Everything was still the same as usual, except the food was more plentiful than usual. Most of them were immersed in the research lab. The efforts of the crowd also brought a New Year gift to Yan. The Firearms Research Laboratory produced an unbelievable product. It was not a progression of guns or bullets, instead, it was a gun with more power. With star meteorite iron, this world's development of firearms was even better. Right now, with constant experimentation, a breakthrough was finally made. It was not just Yan and Chang Yu-chun, John Denver was also quite looking forward to it. If there was such a thing in the last big competition, then not to mention the 500 Shuling people, even if there are twice as many, they would be smashed directly. John Denver thought to himself. The powerful guns were the ultimate weapons on the battlefield. Rifles, at this time. At this time the power of a single rifle was not even as powerful as a bow and arrow made of star meteorite iron. I wonder what kind of gun the research team has developed. A hint of expectation flashed in John Denver's eyes. Artillery and cannons were actually the same things. A cannon was an artillery with a large caliber. The history of artillery was earlier than the guns. In the era of Qi, after the birth of black powder, some scholars thought about it. They threw the gunpowder in a manner similar to a bow and arrow and struck the enemy from a distance. Afterward, in the era of Han, many scholars had started to develop this project and the first real artillery was also produced at this time, named flint cannon. Many scholars also called it a thunderbolt, but the power and quality of this artillery were too poor. Subsequent improvements were ongoing at that time. By the end of the era of Han, the research on artillery reached a peak. At that time, Han couldn't stop thinking about the planetary conquest. Although he knew that there was little hope, he was still trying to do all kinds of preparations. He wanted to be like his father Chi. Following John Denver in his twilight years, fighting for God, and creating the final glory, a lot of money was invested in artillery research. Unfortunately, the biggest problem in developing artillery was fast ignition, uniform quality and power. In addition, designing the right gun was no easy task. If it was not designed properly, it could not be fired. In addition, the level of danger faced by the person firing the artillery was not far from that of shelling the target. While firing a cannon, there would be a number of people, could be killed because of the explosion of the artillery. After the era of the Han, the research on artillery gradually decreased. Back then, even the three colleges were trapped by the manufacturing technology of that time. It could only focus on the development of guns. After that, there were two of the most important changes in artillery. The first was the emergence of smelting technology. The original cannon was made of bronze. It was bulky and had a short lifespan, and with the emergence of steel, cannons became thinner and harder. It became lighter in weight. Its mobility was greatly improved. But these were not enough. Today, the artillery technology of Cao Mang and Xia Dafang was the most advanced, but it was not that useful on the battlefield. Generally, it was used to bombard city walls during sieges and fire large numbers of enemy troops on the battlefield. Bulky artillery was difficult to move to a new location to fire during the battle. The effect was very limited. Secondly, the latest results from the Firearms Research Group helped withdraw the machine. Initially, there was a rigid connection between the gun body and the gun mount. It became an assisted withdrawal machine. The recoil of the artillery was consumed by the withdrawal machine. This improved the stability and accuracy of the artillery, reducing the damage to the person who was firing. Artillery had also become lighter. With this thing, the tall walls don't seem necessary. After seeing the experiment with the new artillery, Chang Yu-chun couldn't help but sigh. Since Yan came to the Royal Tomb Mountains, in just a few years, there was a tremendous change. He had been a part of the army for decades, but he couldn't accept it. The experiment of the artillery. Inside the capital city, the situation had changed dramatically once again. Yuan Shao from the north led 10,000 troops into the capital, and some big clans and ministers in the capital were cooperating with each other. They controlled most of the capital. Between times, the northern clans all responded. The world was in shock. No one expected that in the battle for the capital, the final beneficiary was actually the Yuan family that had been keeping a low profile. The Yuan family is one of the oldest and most deeply rooted of the many great clans of the Xia Kingdom, and is rumored to have existed in the tribal era before the wilderness. Back then, it was a member of the barbarian tribe. Inside the palace, Prince Shu was talking to a somewhat showy-looking eunuch. Although he was a eunuch, Emperor Shu was polite and courteous because this eunuch was not someone else but the leader of the many current eunuchs in the palace. Cao Huaishan. He was the personal eunuch of the previous Emperor Tao. This generation. He was also Emperor Puppet Fu's personal eunuch. The most important thing was that the Emperor's 3,000 personal guards were in the hands of this person. Although the personal guards were not much, each of them was an elite and was equipped with the best equipment. They were unquestionably loyal to the royal family. He did not dare to go too far with the royal family when Captain Dong was in charge of the court. Inside and outside the palace, numerous forces were all very interested in this personal guard team. After the death of Captain Dong, the capital was divided into several forces. These forces competed with each other explicitly and implicitly to dominate this great desolate city. Results for that were expected. It was exposed to the outsiders. The Yuan family is located in the north and has not been very involved in the affairs of the Central Plains, but in the north, the Yuan family can be called a country of its own. I'm afraid they've been snooping around the capital for years secretly, but this time, the crowd responded. Prince Shu said this. He couldn't help but sigh. It's said that the Yuan family has two outstanding people. The one who came to the capital is Yuan Shao and the one who stayed behind is Yuan Shu. It's amazing what you can do. Cao Huaishan smiled faintly. Yuan Shao has 10,000 troops with him at this time, and with the forces that have defected to him in the capital, it is estimated that there are at least 20,000 troops. Besides, the Yuan family in the north can still send a steady stream of reinforcements. Even Lu Shanfeng was temporarily avoiding the front line. This capital, this entire central plains is going to fall into the hands of the Yuan family. Prince Shu looked into the distance and his tone became depressed. Your Highness does not have to be so discouraged. Cao Huaishan smiled and said, how is Yuan Shao better than the previous Captain Dong? Emperor Shu faintly froze. Instantly, he knew what Cao Huaishan meant. Yuan Shao was powerful, but compared to the prime of Captain Dong, he was not even close. Captain Dong was still unable to subdue the entire capital completely. How would Yuan Shao? Thinking about this, Prince Shu gently patted Cao Huaishan's shoulder and said with a friendly smile, Eunuch Cao is still considerate. If you and I work together, we might be able to expel these wild-minded people and return our Xia Kingdom to a great land. Prince Shu's gaze was fixed on Cao Huaishan. Cao Huaishan's expression did not change much. With a slight smile, he said, my duty is to serve His Majesty. After that, he just said goodbye and left. Looking at Cao Huaishan's distant back, Prince Shu could not help but frown slightly. This misogynistic guy. What the hell was he thinking? He didn't see him showing royalty. Was he the true son of heaven? Humph, even you, Prince Shu, dare to think that you are the son of heaven. Turning around a corner, a hint of disdain appeared on Cao Huaishan's face. He quickly walked back to his residence and hurriedly wrote a letter. What second young Master Li with the hidden dragon's destiny and the imposing Cao Meng and Xia Da? These people are bullshit. Cao Huaishan wrote the letter while secretly thinking, the real master has long been determined, you people can only be jumping clowns after all. After he finished writing the letter, he handed it to a guard. This guard, at top speed, rushed to the Royal Tombs Mountains and handed it over to Yan. That's right. This Cao Huaishan was also the heir of the Black Token. He was also a faithful believer in the rumors of the god. After seeing Yan's white token, he fell to his knees, worshipped without hesitation and became the most loyal insider. Yuan Shao actually released all the scholars within the heavenly prison and took them for his own use and planned to reopen the 3 major colleges. Seeing the contents of this letter, Yan could not help but stand up. Her face was a little gloomy. This Yuan Shao actually has such talent. Chang Yuchun, who was already very trusted by Yan, was also shocked. There is a high person behind him. Yan handed the letter to Chang Yuchun. Chang Yuchun quickly took a few glances and he was shocked. Wang Meng. Wang Meng is the most famous wise man in the north. It is said that he can compete with the Zhuge Ming of the southwest. Such a person. Yuan Shao actually took him in. It seems that this Yuan family is not to be underestimated. Your Highness. Chang Yuchun hesitantly looked at Yan. This matter was not really easy to deal with. No need to rush first, reopening the 3 major colleges is not something that can be done in a short time. Yan's face was calm as she said, let's deal with the current urgent matter. Hearing this, a sharp light flashed in the eyes of Chang Yuchun. Of course, he knew what was the top priority of the Great Desolate Army. On the south of the Royal Tombs Mountains, there was a modest county town. This was the place where people of the Royal Tomb Mountains must pass if they want to go south. Originally, it was just a small village. Later on, as the star meteorite, iron ore was found nearby. Since then, it had developed. It was now the size of a county. On this day, in this small, modest county, the only tea house that could be described as elegant. It had 2 floors. There were several figures in fancy clothes sitting there. Everyone here was very familiar with the 3 of them. It was the magistrate of this county and the patriarchs of the 2 largest local clans, and someone from the Yuan family was sitting across from them. Their purpose was also very shady and obvious. For this star meteorite iron mine, closest to the capital, the Yuan family seemed to be in a position to win. After the Yuan family came to settle down, the three gathered at the county magistrate's house and secret discussions took place. What should we do now? What else can I do just like before? Delay it. The situation is so complicated now that the land of the capital may one day change its owner again. But the Yuan family is very powerful, I'm afraid it's not easy to delay. What are you afraid of? Wasn't the former Captain Dong more powerful and still didn't dare to lay a hand on us? Humph, we have 1,000 firearms or the most advanced firearms. No matter how upset the Yuan family is, how dare they touch a single hair of ours? At this time, don't look at the Yuan family's strength, but they won't take it lightly. Humph, we are sitting on the star meteorite iron mine, as long as we have enough time, maybe in the future, we can still interfere with the situation in the capital. How can we surrender to others? After some discussion, the three of them were relieved. Star meteorite's income in recent years was also used by these three to form a firearms unit of 1,000 men to have the confidence to reject others. What they didn't know was their conversation. But it was all overheard by an underlying outside, and it reached Chang Yu-chun, who was nearby. This subordinate was not the heir of the Black Token but a former soldier of the mausoleum. As he couldn't stand the life of the guards of the royal tombs, he ran here to make a living. Just as I expected, these old guys are quite bold. Chang Yu-chun sneered. Followed by, he turned around to look behind. 1,000 soldiers of the Great Desolate Army. Since the era of Qi, this was the first operation of the Great Desolate Army. The target was exactly that star meteorite iron mine. There was no doubt about the importance of star meteorite iron. Currently, the most important expense of the Great Desolate Army was the purchase of the star meteorite iron. Many forces were naturally not stupid. The importance of star meteorite iron was realized very early. As the situation in the world became more and more complicated, the selling price of star meteorite iron was getting higher and higher, and the consumption of star meteorite iron by the Great Desolate Army was very large. It was not possible to keep buying. This nearest star meteorite iron mine was the immediate need of the Great Desolate Army. Chang Yu-chun personally led the team to come here. It's been over 100 years. Chang Yu-chun was filled with emotion when he saw the tall and straight stature of the Great Desolate Army. In those days, the Great Desolate Army was the top army in Xia. An existence that followed the gods to kill the alien races, and now, we finally have a chance to regain our glory. A sharp light flashed in the eyes of Chang Yu-chun. Over the years, since seeing Yen open the gate of the royal tomb, Chang Yu-chun was working hard to train the Great Desolate Army. Today, the Great Desolate Army was totally different as compared to the army when Yen arrived there. In this operation, a research group also followed for the field observation that how practical were the various firearms on the battlefield. That night was the deepest night that had passed. It was just dawn. A soldier standing guard at the star meteor iron mine suddenly noticed that something seemed to be shaking slightly not far away. He picked up the binoculars and took a careful look. With a big surprise, he immediately sounded the alarm. "Hey, it's been discovered, so we'll have to attack by force." Seeing this scene, Chang Yu-chun spread out his hands somewhat helplessly. This star meteorite iron mine was too important. Therefore, he didn't know how many sentries had been set up in the open and in the dark. It took a long time to travel within 500 meters and they were still discovered. Hearing the piercing siren, the soldiers inside immediately climbed out of the tent, each with a firearm in hand. Within the county, the three magistrates were also shocked. They got dressed quickly and came with the people and horses at the fastest speed. "Good for you." Looking at these guard soldiers with a fairly neat formation, the corners of Chang Yu-chun's mouth cracked into a smile and said, "Then let's fight head on and let the world know that the Great Desolate Army is not just the mausoleum guards who eat and wait for their death." The star meteorite iron mine was not on high ground. There was nothing treacherous about it. One could say that it was a flat horse. These are. What kind of people the soldiers of the Yuan family? It doesn't seem to be. Look at their strength, it's only about 1,000. Only 1,000 people, how dare they come to attack our mine? The 3 county magistrates who rushed over were generally observing the great desolate army while they were wiping their sweat. After seeing that there were only 1,000 people in the great desolate army, there was a sigh of relief. There were also only 1,000 people on the team behind them, but each one of them was an elite. They were equipped with all the latest firearms and equipment. Especially they had shotguns in their hands. It cost a lot of money to buy it. Even the Yuan family was a little out of sight. It was just that, what they didn't know was, that the shotgun was a product of the great desolate army that was eliminated for several generations. The current Grand Desolate Army was using the latest type of rifle. The biggest difference between firing a shotgun could be described as the application of tactics. For the 1,000 soldiers in the mines, the queuing strategy was adopted. However, the tactics of the Great Desolate Army could be more flexible and free. Ready, fire. Yu Chun gave an order. 200 meters away from the soldiers in the mine, the Great Desolate Army shot directly. Boom. 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 Numerous bullets were fired. The 3 magistrates were shocked. They were so far away from each other. Why did the other side shoot? In the next moment, something even more shocking happened to them. Soldiers at the mine actually kept getting hit by bullets and fell down. The firing range of the shotgun was only 100 meters while the new rifle's range was 200 meters. This was an almost crushing advantage. In addition, the new rifles were more accurate. As the Great Desolate Army advanced, they were 100 meters away. More than 100 soldiers had fallen in the mines and they couldn't even touch each other's shadows. A one-sided slaughter. These mine soldiers were just an irregular army that had never been in battle and had never been honed. Their morale immediately collapsed. Many people fled backward in fear. The Great Desolate Army quickened its pace and approached within 100 meters. The accuracy of the rifle was much better. After one shot down, another 100 or so people fell. So far, the mine soldiers collapsed right away. They were crying for their father and mother and were running away in a panic. Ignore these people and capture the magistrate and the other great clan patriarchs first. Chang Yu Chun faintly commanded. There was no expression on his face. This one-sided battle was all within his expectations. With the Great Desolate Army's military literacy and advanced firearms, if he couldn't beat his opponent easily, that would be a dereliction of his duty. Soon, the 3 magistrates who came from the small county town were brought before Chang Yu Chun. They were frustrated and confused. Again, it was 1,000 people. Why would their soldiers collapse so soon? Completely defenseless. Chang Yu Chun coldly glanced at the 3 of them. He didn't say anything. What came next was simple. Letting these 3 people come forward. The mine was quickly taken over. Next, they went to the nearby small county town. The small county town was also taken over. Yuan Shao's second son, who had just gotten up from bed, was directly arrested by the Great Desolate Army and later rushed back to the capital. What did you say? The mine is occupied by the Great Desolate Army. In Yuan Mansion, Yuan Shao, who heard the news, stood up abruptly. He looked at his son in disbelief. Wang Meng next to him was also shocked. It's true, that army calls itself the Great Desolate Army. Yuan Shao's second son said with a sad face. The Great Desolate Army. Yuan Shao was still in disbelief, shook his head and said, weren't they guarding the mausoleum in the royal tombs mountains? A bunch of old, weak, sick and disabled people can defeat the 1,000 elite soldiers in the mine. In Yuan Shao's eyes, 1,000 soldiers guarding the mine made him quite apprehensive. If he wanted to defeat them, he couldn't do it without paying a price. Therefore, he could only send someone to negotiate first. It should be the Great Desolate Army. Wang Meng spoke. The royal tombs mountains are very close to the mine. Those who can hide from us and raid the mine silently are most likely the Great Desolate Army. Is this Great Desolate Army so powerful that it can actually defeat 1,000 soldiers guarding the mine? Yuan Shao was still puzzled. You can send someone to investigate first, this matter is far beyond my expectations. Wang Meng let out a long sigh. The army came from the north and then entered the capital. The journey was smooth. The 3 major colleges were about to be reopened. The scholars from all over the world were gathering. No one expected that something like this would happen. The results of the investigation also came out soon. Moreover, they defeated the mine guards in a short period of time. Yuan Shao and Wang Meng were a bit overwhelming for some time. Now was a critical time. They did not want to fight with the Great Desolate Army. Thus, the Star Meteorite Iron Mine was firmly held by the Great Desolate Army. With this mine, the Great Desolate Army relieved the urgent need. Next, there was no further expansion. The main focus was still the continuation of various researches, but the recruitment process was still quietly going on. Time passed, and another year quickly passed. Yan became 17 years old and a lot of big things happened this year. What attracted the most attention from all parties was the complicated power struggle in the capital between Yuan Shao and Lu Shanfeng. Lu Shanfeng, who was obviously weaker, chose to be soft and allied with Yuan Shao and recognized Yuan Shao as his rightful father. But after being ridiculed as a 3-surname slave, Lu Shanfeng went back on his word again. He was looking for opportunities to sneak up on Yuan Shao. As a result, the sneak attack failed and the 2 sides started a war. Lu Shanfeng was no match and led his army to escape from the capital. He headed straight to the southwest. Xiada in the southwest had a reputation for benevolence. He accepted Lu Shanfeng, who had come to join them. Not long after, Lu Shanfeng repeated the same old story. Taking advantage of Xiada's absence, he rebelled again, trying to replace Xiada's position as the Lord of the Southwest, but it had long been expected by Zhuge Ming. Lu Shanfeng was defeated. With only 1,000 men, he hastily fled to the northwest. Cao Meng did not talk about benevolence and justice. He directly tricked Lu Shanfeng into the tent, and then one bullet cost him his life. So far, among the many forces in the world, there was another one missing. Inside the capital, it had become a 3-legged race. Yuan Shao had the most power. Li Tang, led by Li Er, joined the party with integrity. The royalists of Prince Shu and Cao Huatian also had a certain amount of weight. The 3 of them restricted each other, balancing each other out. At Wang Meng's suggestion, Yuan Shao gave up the way to solve the problem by force and began to vigorously recruit scholars and started developing sharper firearms. The capital had a rare period of calm. As Yan became 18 years old, this year was simple for most people. Nothing major happened this year. But it was an extremely important year in the history of the Xia Kingdom. This year, a new type of steam engine was developed by the research team. Later generations called it the industrial steam engine. The birth of this steam engine was the beginning of the first technological frenzy. Some people also called it the industrial age. The human beings of Blue Star had truly come to the age of machines. In the past few years, the research team has made numerous improvements. For example, a separate condenser, a thermal insulation layer outside the cylinder, oil-lubricated pistons, planetary gears, parallel motion linkages, centrifugal governors, throttle valves, pressure gauges, etc. The efficiency of the steam engine was increased to more than 10 times that of the original steam engine. Eventually, the industrial steam engine was invented. It was different from the first steam water lifting machine. In this new steam engine, a condenser was separated from the cylinder wall, making the original machinery that could only lift water. It became a steam engine that could be universally used in various industrial production. The thermal efficiency of the product had increased exponentially. Coal consumption was greatly reduced. Yan personally cut the ribbon for this steam machine. It was promoted. Up next, the industrial steam engine was not only widely used in the mining industry. At the same time, It had also been rapidly promoted in smelting, textile, machine manufacturing and other industries. In short, productivity was greatly increased. At first, scholars did not realize what this station meant until later. Decades later, looking back on the history, they just discovered what a great project to be involved in and in other areas. As various forces attached importance to scholars, more and more new things were being invented. In the southwest region, Zhuge Ming, who was recognized as a wise man, improved the textile machine and invented an entirely new type of the textile machine. It was more than 10 times more efficient than the old textile machine. Subsequently, on the side of the Great Desolate Army, the power of this textile machine was changed to a steam engine. Again, the efficiency continued to increase dramatically. Blue Star's technology is finally on the right track. Seeing this, John Denver was quite relieved. The birth of the industrial steam engine was the real break from the feudal era. Coming to the industrial era, the Xia Kingdom's social form slowly changed. More and more self-employed people and craftsmen emerged. The power of capital gradually rose up. This year, the Great Desolate Award was given to the team that developed the industrial steam engine. It's been almost 30 years since the Great Desolate Award was presented again. Back in the days of Tao, the previous emperor, the Great Desolate Award was cancelled. Today, seeing that the time was right, Yan resumed this award. Of course, at this time, other forces did not recognize it, but later generations recognized Yan's Great Desolate Award. With the increasing number of transactions, Yan was overworked. Finally one day, she fainted. When she woke up, she found a line in the air. "You are too burdened." This line was shown by John Denver. "Father." Yan was very excited. Since the age of 15, she never communicated with John Denver again. "Find someone to help you." John Denver left a sentence and then left. Following the system's deduction, if Yan continued to work with such high intensity, she could not live more than 30 years. "Find someone to help me." Yan pondered about the words John Denver left behind. "Father is right, I am indeed overburdened." Yan secretly thought, "I have to take care of everything, I have to decide everything. In these few years, my own research has been put down instead." This was also a reason for John Denver's interference. From the age of 15 to 18, Yan's own scientific achievements were not as good as when she was 13 years old. A lot of time was spent on all kinds of trivial things in daily life. It's time to let go of some things. Yan recalled her experience in the past few days and muttered to herself, "I am good at physics and mathematics, sloppy in terms of management and strategy, and even more so, I don't know much about military affairs. It's time for me to hand over some of my authority and focus on what I do best, physics and math." Thinking about it, Yan had a plan in mind. "But what kind of person do I need to find who can help me?" Yan then thought again. She looked through the window and looked at the vast land in the distance. Gradually, Yan had a clear understanding in her heart. Xiada in the southwest has Zhuge Ming, Zhu Changba in the southeast has Lu Tianji, Yuan Shao has Wang Meng, and even Cao Meng and Sun Quan have the help of strategists like Guo Jia and Lu Sun. What I am missing now is such a military advisor with a strategic vision. The next day, as Yan ordered, an elite squad was assembled. It was looking for wise people everywhere. In this era, there were not many wise men. Each of them was more or less famous. Soon, a message came through. The most prestigious wise man in the world. Even Zhuge Ming and Wang Meng thought that they were inferior to the one known as the world's most wise man. Gui Guzi. His 2 disciples came out of the mountain. These 2 disciples. One was named Zhang Liang. One was named Su Qin. Both of them had traveled the world. They had left a reputation in various places. This time, he was about to leave the mountain. As this news came out, the attention of all forces was attracted. The importance of a military commander. There was no force that did not know. like Xiada in the southwest region and Zhuchangba in the southeast. Both were the best examples. The two of them were average, but with the help of Zhuge Ming and Lu Tianji, they were like riding a rocket. Later on, even it overwhelmed Cao Meng and Sun Quan. They were the personal disciple of the world's first wise man, Gui Guzi. They were not considered inferior to Zhuge Ming and Lu Tianji. Therefore, Ghost Valley was originally a small desolate valley. It used to be a place like a mass grave. But Gui Guzi did not dislike it. It had been decades since he lived there and also made the place famous. Now it was even more so. This place was even more lively than the street market. Numerous forces sent their people, no matter how far or near, trying to take this chance. They wanted to see if they could gain the recognition of Su Qin and Zhang Liang. Maybe some of them would be seen by the two wise men and soar to great heights just like Xiada and Zhu Changba. There are so many people here. Among the crowd, Prince Shu shook his folding fan, glanced around and said. Not to mention the crowd. It was also dark and overwhelming. But not many of the leaders of the major forces came in person. A man next to him said. This man's name was Deng Yu. It was because he was optimistic about Prince Shu and voluntarily defected to a scholar who came over. However, Deng Yu knew that his ability was limited. It was an active proposal to let Prince Shu come to Ghost Valley. Li Er is here as well. Prince Shu's gaze drifted not far away. On a line of new arrivals, at the head of the group was a gallant young man. If it wasn't Li Er, then who else? It was followed by the inseparable Shi Xuan and Yuan Gang. Compared to the more famous Li Er, the arrival of Li Er got more attention than others. In recent years, the phrase Li Er has the fate of a potential dragon has already spread in the capital. After seeing it firsthand, many forces and big clans turned to the side of Li Er, thinking that Li Er was the future, the one who will rule the world. At this time, Prince Shu and Li Er both turned their heads and saw another group coming in with a good number of people. But the leader was a tall and beautiful girl. Seeing this beautiful and excessive young girl and the group of mighty soldiers behind her, many people talked about it. Yan had been back when she was 16. Every year it was only on New Year's Eve that she would take a trip back to the palace, and every time, she stayed for a few days and then left. There was not much interaction with people outside at all. Therefore, for a while no one actually recognized her. Who is this young girl? The prince glanced at Yan, feeling a little familiar, and frowned slightly. Although they were half-siblings, Prince Shu had only seen Yan when she was a child. Naturally, he didn't remember much. Subordinates don't know. Deng Yu had never seen Yan. He could only look around and then shook his head. Li Er's eyes lit up and asked Yuan Gang beside him, "Who is this woman?" Yuan Gang also frowned slightly. He pinched his fingers, but he couldn't figure it out. It seemed that the sky was blocked. "She's Princess Yan." Suddenly, someone next to him spoke up. Li Er turned his head to look. It was discovered that he was the son of a certain clan. Princess Yan. Princess Yan, who is said to be very beautiful in the palace. The princess who was almost married to the sick consumptive son of Captain Dong in the past. The chatter rang out sparsely. The memory of the world was still there. He finally had some impression of Yan. But what is this Princess Yan doing here? Both Li Er and Prince Shu didn't understand and didn't take it seriously. They were waiting for the opening of Ghost Valley. Ghost Valley had a small wooden door. There was no mechanism, but no one dared to break in. Everyone was waiting outside. Inside the Ghost Valley, in front of a straw house, two middle-aged men were standing at that time. Zhang Liang and Su Qin were these two, whom the crowd outside had been waiting so hard for. "Senior brother, where do you decide to go?" Zhang Liang asked. The two men were still a little confused in their minds. Just a few days ago, they were ordered by their master to leave the mountain today. There was no mental preparation at all. Su Qin smiled faintly and said, "Nowadays, in this Xia Kingdom, The masters are rising and the situation is complicated. What does the senior brother think about it? It's hard to say. Zhang Liang shook his head and said, in every region, every hero has the potential to become a dragon, and it is possible for anyone to conquer the world. I would like to hear more about it. Su Qin laughed. This was a frequent topic of conversation between the two great forces of the world. Xia in the southwest is benevolent and very popular. There are many people who seek refuge, plus the help of wise men like Zhuge Ming. Now among the many heroes, the development is the fastest, but the southwest is mixed with the northwest. In Jiangdong, it is inconvenient to expand externally. Cao Meng in the northwest is good at listening to people and advancing steadily, but it is close to the capital, which is a weakness and an advantage, depending on how it grasps it. Sun Quan in Jiangdong has a barren river and natural danger. He lives in a corner and has a unique geographical location. However, the local native people are still a big obstacle, and it is difficult to completely solve it in a short time. Zhu Changba in the southeast has few people and land, and it takes more time to catch up with other heroes. Li Tang, who is located in Guangzhong, can advance and retreat and defend. He is powerful and low-key, like a dormant tiger. As for other forces, I won't comment. Zhang Liang said a few words softly. The analysis of the whole world situation was very clear. What about the Yuan family that occupies the capital now? Senior brother doesn't even care about it, Su Qin asked. The Yuan family seems to be the most powerful among the various forces, but it has a fatal weakness. Yuan Shao is not a hero. Even if there are wise men like Wang Meng to help, sooner or later problems will arise. Zhang Liang was quite sure. What about Prince Shu? Su Qin asked again. Prince Shu is famous, but has no strength, so there is basically no possibility of success. Zhang Liang said decisively. In that case, senior brother wants to join Li Er's command. Su Qin looked at Zhang Liang and said that. What about senior brother? What are your thoughts? Zhang Liang asked rhetorically. I'm optimistic about Zhu Changba from the southeast, but he has Lu Tianji's help. Su Qin sighed. If it's really the future lord of the world, it's not a bad idea to join. Zhang Liang smiled faintly. The two men were still trying to say something, but suddenly a soft click came and the door of the straw house opened. An ordinary-looking man walked out. At first glance, he looked mediocre, but the more someone looks at him, the more one will feel. This person had an extremely strange aura. Teacher. Teacher. Zhang Liang and Su Qin quickly said respectfully. This person was their teacher. He was also recognized as the wisest man in the world. Ghostbuster. No matter how proud Zhang Liang and Su Qin were, in front of the Ghostbuster, they didn't want to be big. Both of them had seen their teacher's miracles with their own eyes several times. Do you two have a place you want to go? Ghostbuster glanced at the two men and asked. Zhang Liang was about to reply, but something didn't feel right. His mouth was slightly open, but in the end, he didn't speak. Together with Su Qin, he replied, not for now. Then come with me. Ghostbuster said. Teacher, you want to come out of the mountain? Zhang Liang and Su Qin were stunned for a moment and their eyes opened wide. They couldn't believe their ears. As the wisest man in the world, many people used to come to his door to ask for help. They were all famous lords of various forces. But the Ghostbuster shrugged them all off, insisting on staying hidden from the world. Who would have thought? He actually broke his oath today. Ghostbuster didn't say anything. Instead, they headed outside. Zhang Liang and Su Qin hurriedly followed behind him. The Ghost Valley was almost packed with people at this point. Almost every force had sent someone. Prince Shu and Li even came in person, and although Cao Meng, Xia, Zhu Changba and others had their respective military advisors, they also sent important people. No one would mind having more wise men under them. When the crowd saw Zhang Liang and Su Qin following behind a man. First, there was some confusion. Followed, there was an uproar. The one that could make Zhang Liang and Su Qin follow respectfully. Who else could it be? Ghostbuster. It's Ghostbuster. Is this a way for Ghostbuster to come out of the mountain? Everyone was talking. Prince Shu and Li Er felt even hotter. As compared to Zhang Liang or Su Qin, the Ghostbuster naturally carried more weight. This was more than Zhuge Ming and Lu Tianji, the wisest man in the world. Ghostbuster scanned the crowd. He walked over with Zhang Liang and Su Qin. Prince Shu and Li Er wanted to come over and introduce themselves, but the Ghostbuster ignored them. He walked straight up to Yan. He bowed slightly and said, "Greetings, my lord." "Huh?" Yan's eyes widened. She was very shocked. What? How can the wisest man in the world in front of her see her and bow his head? After that, Yan suddenly thought of the words left by John Denver a while ago. It dawned on her. Originally, John Denver had already arranged everything. Who could make Ghostbuster, who swore to stay out of the world, break his oath? Who else could it be but the father? Seeing Yan's suddenly enlightened expression, Ghostbuster smiled faintly. Behind him, Zhang Liang and Su Qin were amazed. Even if they were both extremely smart, they couldn't figure it out even after thinking about it. Since their own teacher was going to come out of the mountain, why would he choose this young girl? Others were even more stunned. Prince Shu and Li Er were completely stunned. After thousands of calculations, both thought that Su Qin and Zhang Liang would choose each of the masters, but they never expected that the teacher of both, Ghostbuster, not only came out of the mountain but also chose a person who no one expected. The Ghost Valley thing had come to an end. The news was out and all parties were very shocked. They all inquired who Yan was. Yan's reputation had initially spread around the world. Yan assuredly handed over the management affairs to Ghostbuster with John Denver's mention. Ghostbuster was the chief military commander and there were two wise men under his hand, Zhang Liang and Su Qin. The management team of the Great Desolate Army was initially set up. Yan could safely return to the research work she loved and excelled at. Do you two still have doubts? After a few busy days, Ghostbuster asked his two disciples, Su Qin and Zhang Liang. Su Qin and Zhang Liang were indeed extremely puzzled at first, but there's no way around it. Their teacher had joined the Great Desolate Army. As a disciple, they could only go along. In the last few days, the two of them racked their brains but still couldn't figure it out. They were still somewhat confused. Seeing two disciples shaking their heads, Ghostbuster smiled faintly and pointed to the front of the Royal Tombs Mountains. Following the direction of the Ghostbuster's finger, Su Qin and Zhang Liang looked over, but only the air was visible. There. Suddenly a light flashed in the minds of the two of them. They thought of something immediately. The shock was overwhelming. They somewhat understood why did Ghostbuster break his oath. Why did he choose Yan as his lord without hesitation? Surprisingly so. Is the legend from the era of the Emperor Desolate actually true? Zhang Liang and Su Qin looked at each other. Both saw the shock in each other's eyes and there was a hint of excitement. Who didn't know about the legends left by Emperor Qi? Their heart was longing for it. With the addition of Ghostbuster, the development of the Great Desolate Army became even more rapid and the reputation of Ghostbuster also made many forces around to visit. Others defected directly. At the same time, Yan also reached the peak of her research. Later generations called these decades, the first technological frenzy. It was not just steam engines and other industrial developments, these were just the application areas of technology. Several extremely important theoretical results had been discovered by a group of scholars led by Yan. It was something that Yan was very curious about since she was a child. The first of John Denver's 6 questions left over from the era of Qi was solved at last when Yan was 20 years old. This year was the year when many inventions were born. A scholar under Zhu Changba improved typography, making the cost of books much lower. From here on out, books were truly meaningful. Into the thousands of households, A team of scholars under Sun Quan in Jiangdong developed the first steamship. Although very modest and with rough technology, it also opened the era of steamships. As for the side of the Great Desolate Army, there were even more new products of all kinds. In the same year, the flush toilet was invented by a research team. The newspaper was also a proposal of a certain scholar. The first newspaper in this world was The Great Desolate News. It was officially out. All the major forces followed suit. They created their own newspaper business. Yan did not hide anything. Many theories and inventions were published one by one in the Great Desolate Journal. It also made the Great Desolate News the most famous and prestigious newspaper in the world. In the end, this was a remarkable year. One of the most important results was born. Yan published the law of gravity in the Great Desolate News. It shook the entire world of scholars. This epoch-making theory was almost unthinkable at that time. It seemed to be a bit beyond this era, but not very practical. Every scholar saw that. This theory laid the foundation for further technological development in the future. This year, the word technology also gradually replaced Keiwu. It became mainstream usage. The three major colleges in the capital reopened. The Keiwu College, the Tiangong College and the College of Medicine were each respectively controlled by Prince Shu, Li Tang and the Yuan family. The Great Desolate Army, on the other hand, had established a new academy, the Great Desolate Institute of Technology. Yan herself was the dean. Time was like water. Yan grew up. There were many big clans ahead who entered the palace to propose marriage. All of them were obstructed by the secret Great Desolate Guards. Later on, no one dared anymore. In the year when Yan was 22 years old, Yan's mother, who had been worrying about her daughter's marriage, died of depression. Yan returned to the palace. She was sitting alone all night. But since then, Yan seemed to let go of some burden and became more decisive and resolute. The promotion of the steam engine and the improvement of textile machines triggered the transformation of the entire Xia Kingdom. The most obvious one was the economy, which had greatly improved. The massive increase in population also made the area of Blue Star to further improve. John Denver looked at the planet panel, which he had not checked for a long time. Name of the planet, Blue Star. Planet level, level 1. Diameter of the planet, 656.7 kilometers. Planet species: 1302. Deduction route: none. Thanks to the explosion of life on the second continent. Regardless of the number of species or the planet's diameter, all were greatly increased. It almost doubled as compared to the time of the big competition. At this time, John Denver also turned his gaze to the second continent. The battle for the Lord of the Land had reached a very intense point on the second continent at this time. Giant Eel, who had been overlooking this continent for decades, had finally reached the end of his life. He was old and was no longer able to maintain the deterrent to the surrounding. He was challenged by younger and stronger challengers in his final years. The first to go to war was 6 atomic dinosaurs. They were always looking for opportunities to take revenge for their father Dong. On this day, the time had finally arrived. 6 atomic dinosaurs surrounded the giant eel by that largest lake. A ground-shaking battle unfolded. Although the giant eel was old, its strength did not decrease much. It was not willing to die like this. It was rebounding crazily. The 6 atomic dinosaurs obviously had no experience in such a life and death struggle. For a time, they were even dominated by the giant eel, but they soon realized. In tacit cooperation, over time, the giant eel's aged physique was finally fatigued. It was dominated by 6 atomic dinosaurs. Failure seemed to be only a matter of time. An era is ending, ha! John Denver commented. Even though the actions of this giant eel who had taken the upper position had been disdained by other creatures. It attacked Dong and the 6-legged python, but it did overlook the land for an era. Under its deterrence, all other creatures survived on the low profile. It could be described as a generation of heroes. Today this hero seemed like it was going to fall down here. However, it was not that simple. Just when it looked like that the giant eel was in great danger and couldn't resist. In the nearby jungle, there was a violent shaking. A huge figure appeared. For decades, there were not just the two big guys on the second continent, the giant eel and the atomic dinosaur. In that red flower incident, ultimately there were several kinds of creatures that got the red flower. Earlier, the huge tyrant bear that was seen by the water droplets was one of them. However, this huge figure who suddenly appeared was not a creature that devoured the red flower. When the 6 atomic dinosaurs attacked the giant eel with full force, just as they were about to kill their father's enemy, this huge figure suddenly dashed out from the jungle and pounced on the nearest atomic dinosaur. This atomic dinosaur was completely defenseless. He was directly bitten in the neck by this huge creature that suddenly appeared. It was a lizard-like creature but with an extremely ugly head. John Denver looked at the unknown creature with sharp teeth in its mouth for a few moments and named this creature skeleton crawlers. Skeleton crawlers were not surface creatures, instead, it was from a deep tunnel in the second continent. He was usually living deep underground. After countless years of nurturing, it crawled out. A horrible creature like the skeleton crawler was born. The skeleton crawler bit this atomic dinosaur. This atomic dinosaur took a serious hit and fell heavily to the ground. It took a long time to get up, but the atomic dinosaur's powerful physical qualities kept it from dying outright. After finishing this atomic dinosaur, the skeleton crawler continued to move. It rushed towards the other atomic dinosaur. At this time, the other 5 atomic dinosaurs had already reacted. They abandoned the siege of the giant eel and stared warily at this ugly creature of unknown origin. The skeleton crawler and the giant eel stood side by side. Both of them had a tacit understanding of each other. They faced off against the 5 atomic dinosaurs. The atomic dinosaurs of this time were not fully evolved. They were not a match for the skeleton crawler and giant eel. After the two sides confronted each other for half a day, the 5 atomic dinosaurs gave up. This giant eel had grown old. It was not far from death. It was not worth it for them to take revenge with their lives. Not to mention, there was another brother lying there with serious injuries and in need of medical attention. 5 atomic dinosaurs roared and took the seriously injured brother and left. Claptrap. Shortly after the 5 atomic dinosaurs left. In the nearby jungle, another huge figure appeared. It was just that, this figure did not show up. It seemed to want to snipe and then sit back and reap the benefits of the fisherman. Unfortunately, the two sides didn't fight. One could only go reluctantly. The skeleton crawler revealed its true face at this point. It charged at the giant eel who was already injured plus old age. The giant eel was no match at all. After fierce resistance, the giant eel was killed by the skeleton crawler. The skeleton crawler stepped on the corpse of the giant eel and looked up at the sky. It seemed that it was announced to be a new king to all the creatures on that land. After this battle, on the second continent, the era of the giant eel was over and the skeleton crawler became the new ruler, and 5 atomic dinosaurs seemed to have inherited the inertia of land. They were not interested in this kind of struggle. They grew up. Nor were they free from animal nature. Over the next few years, they found partners, got married and had children. More atomic dinosaur offspring were born. Since then, the huge group of atomic dinosaurs began to take real shape on the second continent. Other creatures on this land also developed individually. They were hidden and dormant. The pyramid of light built by the droplets filled this place. They started to walk out of the valley and were gradually expanding outwards. The major giant creatures at this time were completely unaware of this translucent intelligent creature. On the first continent, the first technological frenzy was still going on. Among the many techniques and theories, the military industry was the most rapidly developing. The best of them was still the Great Desolate Army. One could say, far ahead of the other forces by an era, Other forces were still working on outdated shotguns while the Great Desolate Army was working on improvements of the rifle. When Yan was 23 years old, a new type of rifle was invented. It was created by a young scholar named Mauser alone. He was called the Mauser at that time. This kind of gun had spiral refiling, used metal-cased fixed-loading cartridges and used smokeless gunpowder. The warhead was armored, which improves the strength of the warhead. The process of unlocking, shelling, loading and locking could be achieved by manipulating the handle of the gun by the shooter. A magazine capable of holding 8 rounds of bullets was installed, which achieved one-time loading and multiple firing and at the same time reduced the caliber of the firearm and improved the initial velocity of the warhead, shooting accuracy, range and lethal power. Mauser had completed the evolution process from ancient muskets to modern rifles and had the basic structure to form modern rifles. So, Mauser's guns were also considered by later generations to be the origin of the modern rifle. So far, firearms have become modern. This was also something that John Denver had seen in certain dramas in his previous life. In that kind of rifle, a shot required a bolt to be pulled. Compared with shotguns, it was completely overwhelming. In his previous life, there was a difference of a complete era. Just when John Denver was observing the situation of Blue Star, someone walked over on a talisman car with an impressive design, outside the relief district. It immediately aroused the curiosity of the residents of the neighborhood. As the door of the talisman car opened, a dignified old man and a young woman stepped out of the car. "Student John Denver live here." As the young woman surveyed the old neighborhood, a look of surprise flashed in her eyes. "Yes, John Denver is an orphan," the old man said. If John Denver was there, he would naturally recognize him. This old man was the principal of the 7th High School, Ricky Brown, and the young woman was the female teacher Ricky Brown who was just hired. "Doesn't it feel a little weird?" Ricky Brown laughed. The record breaker of Jiangcheng's history, the champion of the grand competition, the demonic figure who defeated Zara Ehrman, actually grew up in such a place. There is indeed some surprise. The young female teacher did not deny it. According to common sense, the more talented the trainee, even if the origin was mediocre, there would be no shortage of investment from major forces. There would be no shortage of various resources. As far as I know, student John Denver has not dealt with any forces. Ricky Brown smiled, and in the surprised eyes of the young female teacher, he took the lead and walked forward. "Let's go in and have a look." The two of them arrived at the floor where John Denver lived. They climbed up to the 17th floor. As for the elevator, there was not much of an elevator here. There were other things like fast ladders that can be used instead. It was just that the relief room was just a matter of having something to live in. There was no need for a ladder. After becoming a planet master, everyone's physique would naturally arise. Climbing a few buildings was not a problem in the slightest. Standing in front of John Denver's house, Ricky Brown knocked on the door. John Denver, who was observing the evolution of the blue star within the awakening space, could hear it. "Landlord." John Denver blinked his eyes. He was usually expecting the landlord. Basically, no one would come. He walked over and opened the door to take a look, but it was the principal, Tong Zhen Sheng, and a young female teacher he didn't know about. "Student John Denver, because your communicator didn't get connected, we came here without notice." Ricky Brown laughed. "Oh, my communicator wasn't on," John Denver explained. As he was observing the evolution of the blue star plus no one would contact him, he avoided those harassing communications. So John Denver directly turned off the communicator. "Please come in, both of you." John Denver invited the two of them inside. The house was very simple. There was no couch. John Denver found 2 chairs to let the two of them sit down. The young female teacher sat on a chair. She curiously sized up this simple house that was too small. "This is teacher Liu Yue." Ricky Brown gave John Denver a solemn introduction. Liu Yue teacher is a senior student from Shiguang University. She just graduated this year. Shuguang University. John Denver couldn't help but glance at the young female teacher. This university was one of the 36 super first-class universities. For a lot of students, it was a dream school. In addition, Ricky Brown paused and continued, Miss Lu Yue is still a native of our Jiangcheng city and she was also the champion of the Jiangcheng competition 7 years ago. You two can get to know each other. Ricky Brown smiled. I'm far worse than John Denver. Lu Yue smiled and said, back in my session, only I had an awakening planet with a diameter of more than 30 kilometers. There were so many super geniuses in this session and you. Lu Yue glanced at John Denver and said, this demon-level existence. John Denver smiled. After pouring a glass of water for each of them, he asked, I wonder what the principal came over to see me about. A month has passed since the last big competition. Ricky Brown's face became serious and he said, as the principal, I naturally want to touch on the situation of each student in our school. After all, there is less than a month before the entrance exam. Hearing this, John Denver's face also became solemn. This world was different from his previous life. To go to university, one must take the entrance exam. There was no such thing as early special recruitment. No matter how talented or demonic you are, there was no exception. The competition for the entrance exam was very intense. The acceptance rate was not high. Especially in those 36 super first-class universities, it was almost like thousands of troops crossing the one-way bridge. A person could only take the test once. No matter how good and talented you are, if the entrance examination failed, there was no do-over. One could say, one exam sets a lifetime. In previous years, there were some super geniuses who had poor performance in the entrance exam, thus losing the qualification to compete with other geniuses. There are especially a lot of talented people this year. Ricky Brown said with a solemn expression, not only in our Jiangcheng, but in the entire Labrador province, the geniuses who have emerged are more talented than any previous year. There are rumors out there. This should be the history of the scariest session. But Ricky Brown intensified his tone and said, the enrollment quota of 36 super first-class universities will not increase because of this. So the competition is going to be horrible. As far as I know. Ricky Brown looked at John Denver and said, many talented trainees have been receiving all kinds of special training in this past month. Their strength has improved by leaps and bounds. Like Maya Harris from our school. The number of magicians born on the planet today is already over 1,000 people. Oh. John Denver nodded gently. It was not too surprising. As he could improve, of course, others could too. So. Ricky Brown glanced at Lu Yue next to him and said, I specially hired Lu Yue, who was not only the champion of the competition but also the top student in Jiangcheng's college entrance exam that year. She has great experience in preparing for exams. What the principal means is. John Denver suddenly understood that Ricky Brown brought teacher Lu Yue here for his own purpose. Over the past month, all kinds of news have been received. Ricky Brown laughed and said, this principal of mine is under a lot of pressure. Most of those geniuses are receiving special training, like Maya Harris. You should know. Ricky Brown glanced at John Denver and said, her brother is a teacher at Tianxing University. He has rich experience and various resources. Once she is specially trained, her strength will skyrocket. Oh. John Denver nodded slightly. His face was calm. Suddenly he understood why Ricky Brown came here. This was for him to compete for a good ranking in this entrance examination. For all high schools, the grand competition was nothing. The annual college entrance examination was the most important thing, which would directly affect the quantity and quality of enrollment for the following year. So, Ricky Brown looked at John Denver and said solemnly, John Denver, you, as the champion of the Jiangcheng competition and the most promising member of our school, I naturally cannot sit back and watch. Cooperate with several other schools. A college entrance examination preliminary camp was opened. Personally taught by teacher Lu Yue. Like other geniuses in our Jiangcheng, Ian Brime, Aziz Stary, Graham Ellicott, and Jared Fry from our school, etc. All of them will participate. Concentrate on last month's sprint. John Denver also had no doubts. Since the planetary awakening was done in unison, to ensure fairness and equity, everyone after 3 months of awakening took the college entrance exam together, and there was only this one opportunity. There was no such thing as repeating. If you do well in the exam, you could choose from a variety of top universities. It could be quite brutal. Does the principal mean to let me attend this sprint camp? John Denver asked. That's right. Ricky Brown nodded and said, there are rumors in the outside world now. Zara Ehrman is the biggest favorite of our Jiangcheng's top students in this year's college entrance exam. Her teacher is a powerful planet master who is not weaker than the Jiangcheng city lord. Next to him, the teacher Lu Yue added, and this is not just a random rumor, the ranking on the Heavenly Pride list just released, Zara Ehrman has surpassed you. She is one of the highest of all the trainees in Jiangcheng. The Heavenly Pride list. A look of curiosity appeared in John Denver's eyes. The so-called Heavenly Pride list is a ranking of all recent high school candidates by an authoritative organization. Lu Yue explained, there is no exception to the list, all of them are top geniuses in Labrador Province, Heaven's favorite. There are a total of 10,000 names on the Heavenly Pride list. Among the billions of geniuses in the entire province, only 10,000 made it to the list. The ranking is based not on strength, but potential, so to speak. On the prediction of the ranking of the entrance exam results in a month, there are only 3 people on the list. It's Zara Ehrman, you and Maya Harris. Saying that, Lu Yue directly took out the communicator and clicked on a page, but the contents inside, and projected it into the air. This was a huge list, which was none other than the Heavenly Pride list. Since the list was too long, Lu Yue only projected the pages of Jiangcheng students. John Denver saw that Zara Ehrman's ranking was 2,562nd. This is the only genius in the history of our Jiangcheng who has entered the top 3,000. Lu Yue couldn't help but feel some emotion and said, after all, the whole Labrador province is just too big and there are too many geniuses and in 36 super first-class universities. Ricky Brown then said, there will only be 1,080 enrollments in Labrador province. There will be 30 people from each college, as per policy. Each city will have at least one spot regardless of ranking. Back then, Lu Yue took over and said, I didn't even rank on the Heavenly Pride list, which means I didn't even make it to the top 10,000 in the province. It is by this policy that I just entered Aurora University. That means, as long as it's the top student in each city, no matter how badly talented you are, they are bound to be admitted to super first-class universities. John Denver nodded slightly. He understood that this was also why Ricky Brown was paying so much attention this year. Because in the history of number 7 middle school, there had never been a top student in the entrance examination. Naturally, no one had ever entered a super first-class university. Teacher Lu Yue was a graduate of another school. This year was the most promising year. There was John Denver, the grand competition champion. There was also Maya Harris with good potential, enough to launch an impact on the position of the champion. For most students in the city, Lu Yue glanced at John Denver and continued, only by relying on this policy can you most likely get admission letters from 36 super first-class universities. If you don't get the first prize, you have to compete with other geniuses in the province. The hope is very slim. Student John Denver, do you know how many cities there are in Labrador Province? Ricky Brown asked. More than 500, I didn't count them. This was common knowledge. John Denver naturally heard a little about it. The specific number is 580. Ricky Brown's tone was a little dignified, and our Jiangcheng ranks in the middle and lower reaches of all the cities. That means, there are at least 300 cities which are above our Jiangcheng. Among them are the provincial capital, Amber City, Tianjin City, and other cities where geniuses gather. Every year, there are dozens of monster-level geniuses who have been admitted to super first-class universities. In every way, we are too far behind in Jiangcheng. If you remove the policy, then, in the history of our Jiangcheng, no one has reached the admission standards of super first-class universities. So what about? Ricky Brown looked at John Denver with a hint of hope in his eyes. This year is the best chance for number 7 high school and yourself. Is there any reward for the top student? John Denver asked. Reward? Ricky Brown was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect John Denver to be concerned about this issue. He and Lu Yue glanced at each other and then said, there are no official rewards, but each school will naturally set them. It's like number 1 middle school. If you win the top spot in Jiangcheng, there will be a direct reward of 50 million. Our school is not as wealthy as the No. 1 middle school, but if any student is able to win the top prize, then we can directly promise 30 million. Ricky Brown said proudly. This is just a reward for every school. Lu Yue added with a smile, generally, for every year's champion, each faction has more or fewer representations, such as from our city lord's mansion in Jiangcheng, there will definitely be a huge reward. John Denver didn't know what to say. What he wanted to ask for was not the reward of the first prize of Jiangcheng, instead, he wanted to ask for the reward of the champion of the entire Labrador province. Just being the champion of Jiangcheng, he also knew about previous high school entrance examinations. One could say, even with the current technological development level of Blue Star to participate, he could win this first place. However, if you look at the whole province, that was not so easy to say. After all, John Denver had no way to find out about the geniuses from other cities, but Jiangcheng's champion was so valuable. The reward for the champion of the entire province should be more than that. Student John Denver, are there any more questions? Ricky Brown asked. No, I'll work on it. John Denver said. Since Principal Tong was so serious, John Denver couldn't justify it without showing it. Hearing this, Ricky Brown was relieved. He was afraid that John Denver would not be interested in this entrance examination champion just as in the last competition. This time your main opponents are the two of them, Zara Ehrman and Maya Harris. Lu Yue said at this time. She also pointed to the aerial projection. Zara Ehrman was ranked 2,562. It was among the first 5,000. The only participant from Jiangcheng, Maya Harris's ranking, on the other hand, was 9,875th. John Denver almost barely squeezed into this list. John Denver looked at the projection where he was, and it seemed to be very far back. The numbers are quite auspicious. John Denver spat in his heart. The authority which broke the ranking, how could they rank him so low? This ranking is mainly based on the last grand competition and the planetary development of each genius over the past month. Lu Yue explained, I heard that after Zara Ehrman received special training, her strength rose substantially. So she was favored by the Heavenly Pride list. However, Lu Yue glanced at John Denver and said, it's not that you and Maya Harris have no chance. Maya Harris's hope is relatively slim in you. Lu Yue shook her head and said, I'm not sure, but at least I hope it's bigger than Maya Harris. This special training can be described as the principal has specially organized it for you. The cost is not small. Ha ha. Ricky Brown hurriedly waved his hand and said, not really. Every school has such needs. I'm just going with the flow. Hearing this, John Denver felt a little embarrassed, but he still said, can I not participate in this special training camp? Huh? Both Ricky Brown and Lu Yue were a little surprised. Ricky Brown immediately asked, what are you dissatisfied with? You can still discuss it. That's not really true. John Denver made an excuse and said, I already have a plan of my own, so I won't participate in this special training. For John Denver, special training was meaningless as long as Blue Star could evolve further in the following month. Lu Yue thought about it for a while and seemed to understand something. She smiled and said, John Denver has created a civilization for ordinary people, which is indeed unprecedented. Let alone me, Even a stronger planet master might not be able to teach him. Hearing this, Ricky Brown was a little helpless. That was also true. After chatting a little more, Ricky Brown and Lu Yue were not able to convince John Denver either. They had to get up and say goodbye. Walking out of the neighborhood, Lu Yue spoke up, "This John Denver student seems to be a bit special, huh? There is indeed something special about him." Ricky Brown was quite depressed because he spent a lot of money and carefully crafted a special training camp. It was specially prepared for John Denver, but this main character refused to come. Lu Yue continued, "Why do I feel like he doesn't care that much about this championship? Is there anyone who doesn't care about the championship? If our Jiang City students want to enter the first-rate academy, they'll have to rely on this position." Ricky Brown laughed. "That's not what I meant." Lu Yue's face was a little weird and said, "I always feel that John Denver seems to have a sense of not taking it seriously." "Ha ha, you're overthinking it." Ricky Brown smiled and said, "This little guy must have hidden some of his strength, but could it be that he wants to fight for the provincial championship?" Lu Yue also laughed and did not speak again. After Ricky Brown and Lu Yue left, John Denver sat on the chair and poured himself a glass of water and slowly drank it. At this time, the communicator suddenly rang. John Denver picked it up and took a look. This time it was someone he knew, Sullivan Nesby. Last time at the end of the grand competition, he took the initiative to exchange contact information with John Denver. John Denver could only connect. "John Denver, ha." Sullivan Nesby seemed excited. "What's the matter?" John Denver was quick to speak. "Did you know you've made it to the Heavenly Pride list?" Sullivan Nesby said excitedly. John Denver hadn't answered yet and Sullivan Nesby immediately went down and said, "This is the ranking of all the geniuses in the entire Labrador province. From billions of geniuses, only 10,000 people can get in. From our school, you and Maya Harris both got in. Maya Harris is at the end of the list while you, John Denver, are 8,881st. This is the highest ranking of all of Jiangchang's students in the past. Isn't there still Zara Ehrman?" John Denver reminded. "Yes, but it's not fair that Zara Ehrman has a strong teacher. By the way, John Denver, you should be attending the sprint camp, right?" Sullivan Nesby asked. "I'm not participating," John Denver said. "I thought you'd be there." Sullivan Nesby sighed and said regretfully, "That kid Jared Fry is still rude and wants to challenge you, saying that ordinary people's civilization has no potential. It's stronger when it's bigger. But the upper limit is limited. The further you go, the weaker you will be. When it's time for the entrance examination, don't say it's Zara Ehrman and Maya Harris, even he can't beat them. This guy is really over his head, a clown. That's it, there's nothing going on, I'm hanging up." John Denver smiled faintly. Followed by, he hung up the communication. Didn't even take this to heart. For the current John Denver, there was only one on the head of billions of geniuses in the entire Labrador province. The champion. That was John Denver's goal. It's only less than a month away. John Denver's eyes flickered. What he just said to Ricky Brown was not an excuse either. Since he was ready to take first place, he naturally intended to make a plan of his own. There was something. It was about to begin. Of course, John Denver was not in that much of a hurry. There was still nearly a month before the entrance examination. For other geniuses, each day was precious and urgent, while for John Denver, it was not the same. One of the biggest differences between John Denver and other geniuses was that he could use the power of the origin to accelerate the awakening space infinitely. For other geniuses, after the planetary civilization had stabilized, there would also be a certain acceleration. However, it would only speed up slightly by a few times. The first-level planet was still relatively fragile. It needed to be tended to and attended to regularly. A single mistake would destroy the planet. This has happened before, and if John Denver's planet was completely ignored even now, it would also evolve gradually. There might be volcanoes, earthquakes and other major natural disasters leading to the mass extinction of species, but the ecosystem would not collapse. It was still capable of recovery in a few tens of thousands of years. It was just that the current blue star was not like when it was less than a kilometer at the beginning. The planet was small at that time and there was not much life. Ultra-high-speed acceleration was possible. In addition, as the size of the planet increased, the number of species became larger. More and more energy of origin was consumed. If the superspeed was doubled, it won't hold up at all with the power of the origin that John Denver now possessed. John Denver would now also occasionally intervene, especially when it comes to those once-in-a-millennium demon-level research geniuses like Yan. If there was no interference from John Denver, she would have already been killed by that orb. After sending off Ricky Brown and Liu Yue, John Denver re-entered the awakening space. When he just came in, he found out that on the second continent, there were new changes. The ruler at this time had turned into that skeleton crawler that crawled out of the ground. The 6 atomic dinosaurs were separated. Each had a family and children. The previous lord, the giant eel, was killed by the skeleton crawler. Huge corpses were exposed above the wilderness. No creatures bothered at all. But in the giant eel's lair, there was another moth of the same type. It was much smaller than the giant eel. Feeling the death of the giant eel, the moth seemed sad as it flew around the nest over and over again. In the end, with a big belly, it left the nest, found a secluded wooded area and hid there. After a short time, the eggs were laid. Click. Another period of time passed and this egg cracked open. A little life broke out of its shell. Although those eyes were immature, they had a hint of sharpness. These were the new moths and their growth was very fast. Not long after, their size was already comparable to that of their mother. So far, John Denver also saw that. This little moth had inherited the genes from the giant eel. A new generation of giant eels was born. Build high walls, accumulate grain and slowly claim the throne. Outside the royal tombs mountains, Su Qin and Zhang Liang were there on the farmland to check out how farmers harvest rice in summer. Looking at the joyful expressions on the farmers' faces, Su Qin could not help but sigh. This was what Ghostbuster once said. It was recognized by many people. Today's great desolate army was on the right track. Ghostbuster was the commander-in-chief. He was controlling the overall situation, handling government affairs. Zhang Liang, on the other hand, was doing his job as a military strategist. The Great Desolate Army attached great importance to the military industry, but in these few years, the focus had gradually shifted to other areas. For example, for the basic problem of filling one's stomach, there was a research group of people who specialized in agriculture for a few years. Fertilizer. It had already been manufactured. Mechanical aspects were also slowly promoted. 222. A nearby steam water wheel was running loudly. This was the first steam water wheel in the entire Xia Kingdom. The efficiency was amazing. Of course, the sound was also loud. What has your highness been doing recently, do you know? Zhang Liang looked at Su Qin and asked. I don't know. Su Qin shook his head and said, recently, her highness's whereabouts have been a little strange. We are both in charge of political and military affairs, but... Zhang Liang gave a wry smile and said, it seems that her highness did not completely trust you. A lesson from the past. Su Qin sighed. Both of them remembered a very infuriating thing that happened earlier. A leader of a research group took advantage of the fact that no one was looking. Secretly, the latest research and development results slipped away. Fortunately, Chang Yuchun had long sensed that this person was not quite right. He secretly sent people to monitor. That's what kept this scholar from running. Only after torturing him did he find out that it was Yuan Shao who used high-ranking officials to lure him. Only then did the person in charge choose to turn his back on the Great Desolate Army. This matter made the whole Great Desolate Army quite shaken. The next step was to make the measures for entry and exit more stringent. These were minor things. Zhang Liang didn't take it seriously and said, "These research materials are the credit of many scholars. Even if they leak out, no one else will be able to surpass the Great Desolate Army. The key is, what does Her Highness really think?" Both were a little confused. Although it was necessary to slowly become king, the battle to be fought was also to be fought. The result was that neither Yan nor Ghostbuster seemed to be in a hurry. Yan at this time appeared in a city 100 miles away. This was in the Central Plains. The third largest force except for Yuan Shao and the Great Desolate Army. It turned out to be a general who suppressed the rebellion. His name was Xiao Guang. Now it was also a solo party. There were 5,000 elite soldiers under him, and the forces that depended on him added up to 10,000 soldiers. It was not to be underestimated. I didn't expect that Her Highness the Princess would personally come. I'm flattered. Inside a restaurant in the city, a man in his 30s looked at Yan and said that this restaurant was already booked. In there, only a few people were seated. Yan and Xiao Guang's respective henchmen. "What did General Xiao think about my previous proposal?" Yan asked. "Well." Xiao Guang pondered for a moment and said, "I'm not going to hide it from Your Highness. The Yuan family side has also offered conditions to Xiao." "What conditions?" A black-faced man next to Yan asked. This black-faced man was not Chang Yuchun but a fellow of Chang Yuchun. His name was Shu Tiande. His ability to lead troops was not inferior to Chang Yuchun, and he was extremely powerful. This time, he was ordered to protect Yan. The Yuan family said that if the Yuan family is able to dominate the Central Plains in the future, then Xiao Guang smiled and said, "I will be named a great general, and I won't go into detail about the other conditions." Great general. Shu Tiande's expression changed slightly. The so-called Great General was the highest rank of the Xia Kingdom's military at present. It was also the commander-in-chief of all the armies. This post was vacant for a long time. Back in the days of the Qi's era, it was Qi himself. This was something that the Great Desolate Army could never provide. With such a generous offer, why is General Xiao still considering it? Yan asked. Although the position of general is good, in the eyes of Xiao. Xiao Guang looked at Yan, said with a flash in his eyes, "I can't be compared to Her Highness' favor. I'm also from a prestigious family. I'm almost 40 years old and haven't married yet." "You?" Shu Tiande slammed the table and stood up. Xiao Guang's meaning was so obvious. Anyone would know. "General Shu, sit down." Yan, however, had a calm face. Shu Tiande could only give Xiao Guang a fierce glare and sat down somewhat depressed. "General Xiao should think about our conditions." Yan finished the sentence. Then she got up and left. Looking at Yan's departing figure, a strategist next to Xiao Guang spoke up and said, "My lord." Xiao Guang shook his head and said, "Although I have some thoughts about Princess Yan, I'm not stupid. If I detain someone now, won't we have to confront the Great Desolate Army? The Great Desolate Army is so close to the capital. Yuan Shao can be said to be restless. When two tigers fight, one will be hurt. Wouldn't it be nice for us to eat and drink here and sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight?" At the end of the story, Xiao Guang's mouth curled into a smug smile. After leaving the city, Shu Tiande could not hold back any longer and said angrily, "Your Highness, I'll go back and order the troops and behead this guy." "Forget it." Yan shook her head and said, "Hand over the plan. If not to the moment of no way, there is no need to resort to force." Shu Tiande glanced at Yan. There was something in his heart that he didn't understand. Chang Yuchun, Su Qin and Zhang Liang were interested in Yan's behavior over the past year. There was some confusion. For example, this time negotiating with Xiao Guang. Xiao Guang asked Yan to come over in person. Even though Yan clearly knew the other party's intentions, she didn't refuse. Perhaps only Ghostbuster knew the reason for this, but when they went to ask the Ghostbuster, he laughed it off. Yan did not go back to her residence when she came back to the Royal Tombs Mountains. Instead, she came to Ghostbuster's grass hut. Even here, Ghostbuster still liked to live in a grass hut. Warlord, does the father have a hint? Yan asked with a hint of hope in her eyes. No. Ghostbuster looked at the location of the legendary passage and shook his head. I haven't seen it since the last time I was given a hint. On this side of the world, at present, only Yan and Ghostbuster knew about John Denver's existence. Last time. Why did Ghostbuster take the initiative to worship Yan as the master? Naturally, it was because John Denver tipped him off. Can you make some predictions? Yan hesitated for a moment and asked. The most powerful thing about Ghostbuster was not a strategy. Instead, it was his heaven's reasoning. Ghostbuster looked at Yan, smiled and said, the heavenly opportunity is unpredictable. Your Highness wants me to measure the heavenly. That is also too difficult for me. At this time, the air suddenly shook slowly. Yan and Ghostbuster's eyes stared straight. They were looking at it without moving. This familiar sign. Glory restarts again, get ready. John Denver left this sentence after that there were no more hints. Yan might not be able to comprehend it for the time being, but it shouldn't be difficult for Ghostbuster. Father! Yan shouted rather excitedly, but there was no response for a long time. The words in the air slowly dissipated. Yan and Ghostbuster looked at each other and both saw a tremble in each other's eyes, as well as a hint of excitement. It's ready, Your Highness. Ghostbuster said. Is this day finally coming? Yan muttered to herself. After completing the law of gravity, Yan seemed to feel that her whole body was empty. She was no longer 12 or 13 years old. That desire to explore the nature of everything in the world came especially after the death of her mother. The only affection in the world that could keep her occupied was also broken. The rest might be an illusory legend. Yan had seen Chi and Han's diaries, especially Han's. Han's old age could be described as quite miserable. He was seriously ill in bed, blinded by the top and bottom, but had been reluctant to leave. For the sake of someday, the ability to retraverse planetary passages and the alien conquest, but Han struggled to hold on for 10 years. After all, it could not wait. Yan was also only in her 20s. She sometimes wondered. What if she couldn't wait for this day? However, just when it was totally unexpected, John Denver's tip appeared. Yan pressed down her excitement. Her eyes regained that glimmer that she had when she first studied the gravity of all things. For his part, Ghostbuster called Su Qin and Zhong Liang. Teacher. Su Qin and Zhong Liang shouted respectfully. There were some questions in their mind. This teacher, who was always on cloud 9, why was he looking a little excited? Do you have any good strategies for dealing with Xiao Guang in the south? Ghostbuster directly asked. Su Qin and Zhong Liang were slightly taken aback. Yan was in charge of Xiao Guang's matter. The teacher never bothered with it either. Why was he asking all of a sudden today? With our strength, it is not easy to solve Xiao Guang. Not knowing Ghostbuster's thoughts, Zhong Liang could only reply in a normal manner. What if we don't send a single soldier? Ghostbuster looked at the two men and said, solve this matter within a year, is there a problem? No. Ghostbuster asked in person. Su Qin and Zhong Liang had no confidence, but it could only be dealt with. Seeing the rapid and orderly development of the Great Desolate Army, John Denver also did not observe much. He slowed down the flow of time and afterward, out of the house, here it was again. Planet Association. Hello, Mr. Zhang. The staff member who received John Denver was an old acquaintance. The young female staff member from the first few times. It's been a while since you've been over here, what can I do for you this time? The young female staff member asked. I'm here to apply for the title of Star Hunter. John Denver said. After that, she took out his membership card. This was the uniform membership card of the Planet Association. Star Hunter. The young female staff member took the membership card. She operated a few times with the projection in front of her. It became evident that John Denver had done all kinds of good things. Huh. Seeing all of this, the young female staff member could not help but make a slightly surprised sound. Is there a problem? John Denver asked. No problem, I'll handle it for you. The young female staff member smiled faintly and immediately operated quickly. Star Hunter, huh? John Denver had a faint expectation in his heart. Star Hunter was a general title of the three major associations. Only with this title could he pick up some quests, but it was not too demanding. Choose one of two conditions. 30 planets needed to be plundered. Or 10 successful plundering sessions in a row. In general, for a planet master like John Denver who just awakened the planet not long ago, the success rate of plundering planets was very low. Like the lowest level warrior planet, it was hard to pass. Not to mention the plundering of 30 planets, or it was plundering 10 times in a row. The former depended on the accumulation of time. The latter was difficult. Mr. Zhang. The young female staff member smiled and said, you have successfully plundered 15 planets in a row, which meets the requirements identified by the Star Hunter. Do you want to process it now? Process it now. John Denver said. Okay. The young female staff member's fingers worked quickly. She quickly helped John Denver get his job title. She handed back the membership card and said, the relevant information has been entered into the card, you can check it at any time. That membership card there used a light card planet technology. There was no need for other equipment, it could be viewed directly. John Denver took a look at it and discovered that he had become a junior Star Hunter. The reason why John Denver took this title at this time was that he wanted to see if there were any good quests to take. Even John Denver was extremely jealous of the resources of some planets. What are the more popular quests now? John Denver asked. Is Mr. Zhang taking a quest? The young female staff member was not surprised. As a Star Hunter, it would be strange not to take up the quest. Here are all the missions you've been able to take so far. You can take a look. The young female staff member put a projection that was displayed in front of John Denver. John Denver was still a planet master. Junior Star Hunter. Naturally, it was impossible for him to accept all the quests. For most of the quests, strength was required. Densely hanging on it, a quest with no end in sight. Inside this, some of these were the quests from the association. Some were rewarded by individuals or by various forces. John Denver saw all sorts of quests at first glance. At the top of the guest list, there was a special quest marked in red. It would have to cost a lot of money for the Planetary Association to do so. This quest. When the young female staff member saw John Denver's gaze fixed on this quest, she introduced, it's extremely difficult and is one of the few 5-star quests among all the quests so far. A 5-star quest. John Denver raised his eyebrow slightly. Our association's quests range in difficulty from low to high. Divided into 1 star to 5 stars. The young female staff member explained, except for the super 5 stars which are almost hard to see. Usually 5 stars is the highest difficulty of the quest, and this quest has failed 10 times earlier. The conditions of the bounty quest are personal, and the requirements are also very high. You have to be a Star Hunter to pick it up. John Denver nodded slightly. Non-Star Hunters could also accept quests, and among Planet Masters, not many could become Star Hunters. This quest was indeed very demanding. You could also imagine how difficult it was. I'll take this quest. John Denver said. He handed over the membership card again. Okay. The young female staff quickly completed the process and said, after accepting the task, you need the confirmation of the person offering the reward, that is, the recognition of the other party, in order to truly accept it, otherwise this quest is invalid. How long does it take for the other side to confirm? John Denver asked. Within a day. The young female staff member paused for a moment and then added, The reward person for this quest seems to be in a hurry, so it should be faster. In fact, it was a little faster than what John Denver thought. He had just walked out of the gate of the Planetary Association and the communicator rang. John Denver picked it up and took a look. It was a stranger. As he connected, a woman's voice came from the other side and said, "Hello, is this Mr. John Denver? I'm Wang Yao, the bounty giver for the mission you just took. If it's convenient for you, come to the 7th floor of the Planet Association." "Okay, I'll be right there." He hung up the communication. John Denver went straight to the 7th floor of the building. The Planetary Association building was not just for work. All kinds of entertainment services were available inside. The 7th floor was exactly a place to eat, drink and meet guests. In a spacious private room, John Denver met Wang Yao. Besides Wang Yao, there were 3 people standing. 2 men and 1 woman. John Denver swept a glance and just found out that this should be the other 3 people who accepted the quest. Seeing John Denver's young face, Wang Yao and the other 3 were slightly stunned. For the planet master who just awakened the planet not long ago, it was rare to be able to become a star hunter. "Excuse me." Wang Yao glanced at everyone and said, "Before telling the description of the quest, I must confirm everyone's strength. You know it too that this quest has failed 10 times. So now I will be more cautious." "No problem." A tall young man next to him smiled, glanced at John Denver and said, "This is also a very good rule to prevent some ignorant people from getting in. I don't want to be held back and cause the quest to fail." The tall young man directly projected his membership card. On the membership card, there was information about each person. One could choose what to make public yourself. "Huh!" The 2 people next to him both let out a gasp of surprise. Wang Yao was also slightly surprised. This tall young man. The success rate of the completed quests of this tall young man was actually as high as over 70%. Be aware. According to the statistics of the Planetary Association, among the star hunters, the general quest success rate was only about 40%. It was good to have more than 50%. More than 60% was already the best. The ones with over 70% were 10 star hunters and it was hard to even see one. To see the ones over 80% was extremely rare. For such star hunters, the Planetary Association would also issue a special title. Elite Star Hunter. Above Elite Star Hunters, there was a more weighty title, Legendary Star Hunter. This title had been a long time since it appeared in the Labrador province because it required a 100% success rate. It was almost impossible to reach. Of course, there was also a requirement for the difficulty of the quest. For example, to become Legendary Star Hunter, one must complete 3 or more Super 5-star quests. 100% success rate. Plus 3 Super 5-star quests. These 2 conditions add up and could let this title be like a mirage. Unattainable. I'm not far from 80% now, and if I can complete this 5-star quest, I'll soon become an elite star hunter. The tall young man grinned and said with great confidence, "Welcome to join." Wang Yao nodded. After accepting the tall young man, she looked at the membership cards of the other 2. Biographies of these 2 were not as good looking as the tall young man, but it was not too bad either. Finally, it was John Denver's turn. "This is my first time accepting a quest." John Denver took out his membership card and said directly, "First time." The other 4 were stunned to hear it. "Are you kidding me? For the first quest? How dare you take on a 5-level difficulty quest?" Wang Yao frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. Looking at John Denver's information projection, a faint look of shock appeared on his face at this moment. The other 3 also cast their gazes over and their faces became a little weird. All the 15 plundered planets were successful. 1 of them was an advanced civilization planet and 4 were intermediate level civilization planets. All 4 were a little surprised. This resume was very simple, but it was a little too much. There were a few people when they were the first level planet masters, Could they successfully plunder 15 planets in a row? In addition, there was also an advanced civilization planet in here. Welcome. Wang Yao said, and then projected her information and said, "This is my information and I will personally participate in this quest." John Denver and the other 4 people looked at it and found that this Wang Yao was also not simple. Her quest success rate was over 70%. Since everyone is okay with it, Wang Yao took out 5 pieces of paper engraved with mysterious symbols and said, "Just sign this contract first." John Denver looked over. This was a contract from the spell planet. Once it was signed, it would be impossible to violate. For example, important information about this quest could not be revealed. It's just that spell contracts were expensive. Not many people were willing to use it. The 4 people didn't mind. All signed their names on the contract. "Can we talk now? What kind of quest is this?" the tall young man asked impatiently. The other 2 also looked at Wang Yao curiously. A 5-star quest that could fail 10 times. It must not be simple. The planet where our quest is located is a 3-star planet. Wang Yao looked at the crowd and said that. A level 3 planet? You're not kidding, right? The lean young man next to the tall young man called out. This is when the planet is at its peak. Wang Yao continued, now that this planet has become a masterless planet for many years, its level has been lowered and now it is. But all 5 of us are level 1 planet masters and. The lean youth looked at Wang Yao and said, "Why don't you let the level 2 planet masters go?" This was a real problem. John Denver and the others all stared at Wang Yao. Wang Yao smiled bitterly and said, "I would like to, but because the first quest failed, so this planet is on alert. As long as more than 5 level 1 civilizations go in at the same time, it will be sensed. If that's the case, then your first mission should have been carried out by a level 2 planet master. They didn't even succeed, so it's even more unlikely for us, level 1 planet masters." The lean youth was still in doubt. "Hear me out first." Wang Yao was not in a hurry and explained, on this planet is a card civilization, which has a strength testing card. As long as the strength of the foreign enemy exceeds 5 first-level peak civilizations, an alarm will be issued. So if you want to go in, there are at most 5 people and you have to be the first-level planet master. I'll tell you the details on the way. Wang Yao's face suddenly looked cautious as she said, "The next thing I'm going to say is exactly what this mission is. On this card planet, there was once the greatest card maker of all time. In the last few years of his life, he created a powerful auxiliary card. One could say, the supreme auxiliary card of this planet, and the goal of our mission this time is this supreme auxiliary card." Auxiliary card. The tall young man was stunned for a moment and then asked, "What is this auxiliary card?" Amplification card. Wang Yao slowly spat out 3 words. "What?" The tall young man and the other 3 were shocked. John Denver also raised his eyebrows. The amplification card was a big deal. In the market, it was a priceless existence because it was effective for resources on each planet. For example, vibranium mines on the Blue Star. There was now a 10-ton storage capacity. If he used an amplification card, it would be directly increased to the corresponding multiple. It was an instant thing. Instead of waiting for the Blue Star to evolve slowly, the current vibranium mine had to be used sparingly. If only there were more, the bullets and guns of the Great Desolate Army could all be made of star vibrating alloy. The difference in power of a vibranium alloy bullet and ordinary bullets was great. Hearing this, John Denver and the others also understood why this task was so difficult. It also made Wang Yao cautious enough to use the spell contract. Amplification card could be said that it was the most powerful kind of auxiliary item for the level 2 planet. Once this news got out, it was even possible that it would trigger a powerful planet master to take action. Forcibly take this supreme amplification card away. The breathing of the other 3 became slightly rough. For John Denver, this was also a very useful item. "How many of these amplification cards are there?" The tall young man asked the crucial question. John Denver and others also looked at Wang Yao. 1. Wang Yao said with a solemn face, only one. This amplification card is the greatest card in the history of this card planet. It is the fruit of a lifetime. It's also the highest rated card. There can't be more. Its amplifying effect is 10 times. 10 times. The tall man and the others were a little surprised. 10x amplification card. If the outsiders knew, it would certainly attract some powerful planet master to attack. In the federal law, there were very strict protection measures for each unowned planet. They are generally divided into plunder planets and quest planets. Plunder planets were the planets where John Denver had previously plundered the power of origin. The life force of the planet was close to collapse, that's why it was allowed to be plundered, while the planets where life was still relatively intact could only be set as a quest planet. Origin of the ownerless planets was divided into two main types. The first one was a carefree person like John Denver. After the death of John Denver, the ownership of the planet naturally would go to the federal government. This was a relatively rare occurrence. The second one takes the majority. When a planet owner dies, the planet is inherited by a loved one. It was just the masterless planet. If outsiders want to get in, a channel must be created by a planet master of at least level 5 or above. The higher the planet's level, the stronger the power of the planet master needed. The price of the 5th level planet master's shot was not cheap, and the level 1 planet was not worth it. Therefore, most successors were entrusting the unowned planet to various institutions. For example, the Planetary Association. They had a powerful planet master. Planetary channels could be manufactured in bulk, collecting tolls was their main income. Like this card civilization planet that Wang Yao mentioned. For this current second level planet, tolls could be as high as $1 million federal dollars at a time. In addition, there were strict restrictions on the level and number of planet masters that could enter. On a level 1 planet, only level 1 planet masters were allowed to enter. On a level 2 planet, only planet masters at level 2 and below were allowed to enter. However, if a low-level planet really had some precious items. For example, this time the 10 times amplification card. Then there were forces that would invite some powerful planet masters who didn't care about federal laws to take action. Of course, this was just a special case for most of the planets. Before the planet completely lost its life, they could make a lot of tolls. This supreme amplification card was born after the death of the planet owner of this planet, so. Wang Yao explained, its successor doesn't know either. I was only able to discover it by an accidental quest before. 10x amplification card. These words still echoed in the minds of the tall man and the others. There had been items with similar amplification in the past. However, in general, 2x or 3x was the most common. A 10x amplification card born on a level 2 planet was simply a bit unbelievable. For lower level planets, such items could be said to be one of the most valuable resources. Like on a planet of immortal cultivation, if this amplification card was used on 100 spirit stones, it would be able to turn into 1,000 in an instant. Almost a qualitative leap. 10x amplification, if I can get it, the vibranium storage on the blue star can be directly increased from 10 tons to 100 tons. John Denver secretly thought, when the time comes, all bullets can be made from vibranium alloy. On the blue star, the reserves of star meteorite iron were relatively abundant, but the vibranium was still less. Most of the guns and bullets used by the Grand Desolate Army were made of star meteorite iron. Vibranium had to be saved. If he could get this supreme amplification card, for Blue Star and the Great Desolate Army, the increase in strength would be remarkable. There is only one supreme amplification card and there are 5 of us here, how should we divide it? The tall young man looked at Wang Yao and asked. Yeah. The lean man next to him echoed, don't talk about giving money, this kind of thing is hard to come by and every planet master desperately needs it. This question has been asked before. Wang Yao said calmly, my opinion is that after we finish dealing with the enemy, let's rely on ourselves. Whoever has the ability and whose luck is good, can have it. What do you think? Wang Yao looked at John Denver, the tall young man and others. Although this method is a bit rough, it is also straightforward. I agree with it. The tall young man nodded. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes. I also agree. The lean man pondered slightly and did not object. What about you two? Wang Yao looked at John Denver and another pretty woman. Okay. I also agree. Both were fine with it. Okay. Wang Yao nodded and said, since everyone agrees, the distribution of the Supreme Card is settled. Next I'll tell you the location of this Supreme Card and how difficult it is to get it. Let's start with a brief description of this card planet. Wang Yao provided relevant information and images to them through the communicator. It was projected into the air. The others looked over. John Denver also looked at it. This was a card civilization planet that was level 3 at its peak and had now fallen to level 2. Card civilization was a low-level civilization. It was a relatively strong category in low-level civilizations. The planet had an area of more than 2,000 kilometers. There were still tens of thousands of transcendents left. The area of distribution was relatively wide. The combatant on this planet is called Cassius and fights with cards and carries cards in his hand. Wang Yao introduced, and the cards are mainly divided into energy cards, battle cards and auxiliary cards. Among them, energy cards are indispensable. It provides energy for the other cards when they are cast. Cassius is divided into primary, intermediate and advanced. Advanced Cassius is equivalent to the strength of a level 2 planet. The primary ones are weaker and with the civilizations on our respective planets, they are not difficult to deal with. The key one is the intermediate level Cassius. Its strength is equivalent to the strength of a transcendent and a level 1 peak civilization. There are now 10 cities on this planet. There are more or less people living in each city. There are more than 10,000 people. John Denver listened while looking at the projection. The 10 cities identified above. They were very far away from each other. It was hard to get support in a short time. There are 3 advanced Cassius on the planet. Each of them occupies a city and the location of this Supreme Increase card is in a small city called East Shangwei City. This is also the place where the Supreme Amplification card maker, the greatest card maker of all time, grew up. It's very far from the city where the 3 senior Cassius are located. So we have enough time to pick up the Supreme Amplification card before the 3 senior Cassius arrive. What is the strength of Cassius in this eastern Shangwei city? The tall young man asked. The resident population is about 2,000 people. Among them are more than 1,000 Cassius. Most of them are primary and the number of intermediate Cassius is 87 people. 87 people. The tall young man and the lean young man were both slightly stunned. But, Wang Yao continued, these 87 intermediate Cassius are not a group, on the contrary. It's divided into a dozen factions, all with huge grudges against each other. If one of the factions was attacked, they couldn't be happier. They are absolutely not going to help. So, this Supreme Amplification card should be in the hands of one of the factions. The tall young man asked. That's right. Wang Yao nodded and said, hidden in one of the most powerful forces in eastern Shangwei City, the Black Hibiscus Flower Cassius group with 27 intermediate level Cassius and hundreds of primary Cassius, its leader, Tang Hanpei, is even known as the strongest person in eastern Shangwei City. He possessed the strength of a peak intermediate level. Wang Yao paused and a hint of complexity flashed in her eyes and she said, the first 10 times I brought people in, they were obstructed by this Tang Hanpei and finally failed. Okay. Wang Yao scanned John Denver and others, said, the general situation is these, later I will send you a copy of all the specific information. If there are no questions, we'll meet here tomorrow. After a pause, Wang Yao remembered something and said, by the way, I will pay for the toll this time. It shouldn't be much of a problem. The lean man pondered for a moment and said, the quest is indeed somewhat difficult, but The corners of the tall young man's mouth curled up in a confident smile and said, "It's not too much, I'll take it." "No problem." John Denver and the rather attractive woman did not give up either. "Well, then, we'll meet again tomorrow." After saying that, Wang Yao took the lead and headed outside. John Denver also left and returned to his own residence in the relief community and entered the awakening space again. After some deduction with the system, John Denver sped up the time flow slightly. On the Blue Star, after 3 years of development, the situation in Xia Kingdom had become somewhat delicate. The Great Desolate Army kept increasing the number of soldiers. Naturally, it attracted the attention of Yuan Shao and Xiao Guang, who had been on guard. The center of defense for both was placed on the Great Desolate Army, but they left out other places. In the east of the capital, a new faction rose up. The leader of this force was named Wang Mong. He was avant-garde in his thinking. Surprisingly, he automatically renounced his status as a rich boy and changed his name to Wang Tianmong. In addition, he had also distributed his family's wealth and fertile land. It was distributed to the common people. Subsequently, in the chaos of the world, a team was also assembled. Later, after the restoration of peace in Xia Kingdom, Wang Tianmong still led his team to fight against the wealthy and nobles. At first it didn't go well. Later, Captain Dong died of illness. Especially when Liu Shanfeng was defeated, some people fled to Wang Tianmong and defected to him. With the defection of these people, Wang Tianmong's strength increased greatly. In addition, Yuan families and Xiao Guang's attention was all on the Great Desolate Army and not enough attention was paid to him. In just a few months, one of Wang Tianmong's men became very brave. 10 battles and 10 wins. Beating the nearby forces to the ground made Li Yi famous. What Wang Tianmong did after that shocked the world even more. He put all the wealthy and nobles in prison and distributed all of their family's property to the commoners. This move also attracted countless poor people who came from hundreds of miles to join him, letting Wang Tianmong's power rise greatly. The number of his men was 50,000. Under the cry and flattery of many ministries, Wang Tianmong's heart fluttered a little. He actually set his sights on Yuan Shao, the closest to the capital, and publicly declared to save the people of the capital. He didn't make any preparations. With a large number of troops, he swarmed to the capital. Yuan Shao, who got the news, was shocked. He hastily retrieved the main army that was monitoring the Great Desolate Army. With Wang Meng as the military advisor, he himself was the commander and went out of the city to meet the enemy. After all, as one of the most powerful heroes in the world, Yuan Shao would not allow a madman to attack the capital. Compared to Wang Tianmong, Yuan Shao had more soldiers. The number was 100,000. Wang Tianmong does have 50,000 people, but halfway up the Royal Tombs mountain, Su Qin was discussing the matter with Zhang Liang. Zhang Liang laughed. Most of them are the people who have defected and rushed over with a hoe in their hands, and Yuan Shao doesn't have all of 100,000 people. 50,000 people at most. This includes an estimated maximum of 30,000 conventional troops. The difference between the two sides is significant. Yuan Shao has superior military strength and there is a strategist like Wang Meng, so he should win easily. Su Qin said. On the surface it looks like this, but why do I feel something different will happen? Zhang Liang laughed. Let's wait and see. Soon, Yuan Shao's team collided with Wang Tianmong's team. The two sides confronted each other at a place called Guandu. There was also a river called Fei River. Both sides were stationed on both sides of the Fei River. Everyone was on guard. Since there are two other forces next to it, Xiao Guang and the Great Desolate Army. These two sides did not dare to fight for a while. The standoff lasted for a month. Over time, there was a rumor that they spread out in Yuan Shao's barracks. It says, the strategist Wang Meng was a distant relative of Wang Tianmong. The reason for this was that both of them were surnamed Wang. If it was replaced by any of the masters such as Xia Da and Cao Meng, All would scoff at this statement, but Yuan Shao was suspicious and self-willed by nature. In fact, he was very tired of hearing that Yuan Shao is all due to Wang Meng today. Now it looked like they could take down Wang Tianmong by making a big jump in their own strength plus the false accusations of a few villains underneath. Yuan Shao was furious and Wang Meng was immediately arrested and dismissed the post of military advisor. Without Wang Meng's dissuasion, Yuan Shao then began to give orders. Crossing the river to fight, a famous battle called Battle of Guandu, also known as Battle of Fei River, was born. The outbreak of the Battle of Fei River could be said that it was unexpected and reasonable. After more than a month of stalemate, Yuan Shao finally couldn't take it anymore. Earlier, there was also Wang Meng's extreme dissuasion, thinking Wang Tianmong's side was just a bunch of rabble plus not much food at all, just drag on for 2 or more months. It must be able to drag the opponent down. Wang Tianmong's troops would naturally run away by then without losing a single soldier. They could easily take down this opponent. But now, Wang Meng was under control. The other generals and advisors on Yuan Shao's side felt that they should take the initiative. Otherwise, it would look too unimpressive. Yuan Shao originally wanted to show his strength to the forces of the world to make a hard appearance. Soon to be spoken for. So it was decided to send troops across the water to fight. Talking about the strength of the two sides, Yuan Shao's side clearly had the advantage. The number was 100,000. Although not that much, it was actually 70,000 to 80,000. 50,000 of them were regular troops. While on Wang Tianmong's side, the regular army was less than 20,000. Most of the rest were here to make up the numbers. At the same time, all forces were also watching this unprecedented battle. This was not just since the world was in chaos, it was also the biggest battle ever since the establishment of Xia Kingdom. There are so many elites, even if they cast a horsewhip, they can cut off this Fei River. Yuan Shao was riding on a high horse, looking at the soldiers in front of him, he smiled arrogantly. The people next to him also joined in. However, in the next moment, his laughter came to a screeching halt. He saw a cavalry force suddenly appear on the other side. It was not a firearm in their hands. Instead, they had an ancient spear. They were quickly rushing towards the Yuan Shao soldiers who had just climbed ashore. The leader was none other than the chief general under Wang Tianmong, Li Yi. Yuan Shao's soldiers did not expect that. Wang Tianmong's side actually dared to initiate the attack. In a hurry, just a few random shots were fired. It was chopped down by the cavalry that rushed over. On the river bank, it was a mess. Li Yi led the cavalry to charge directly into the water and started killing crazily. During this period, there were also people shouting Wang Meng has revolted, Yuan Shao is dead and similar rumors. There were many Yuan Shao's men who trusted Wang Meng. Hearing this, there was even more chaos. One by one, they scattered and fled. Most of them fled backwards. The soldiers behind them could not distinguish the situation and fled with them. A strange scene appeared on the Fei River. Li Yi's side had no more than 10,000 people, but they chased and killed tens of thousands of Yuan Shao's soldiers. This battle fell towards Wang Tianmong's side in such an unexpected way. This year Yan was 23 years old. The Battle of Fei River broke out. The ending surprised everyone. Wang Tianmong's side won with fewer soldiers and defeated Yuan Shao in a big way. Yuan Shao fled in haste with the remnants of his army and fled back to his home in the north. From then on, he lost the qualification to compete for the world, and the strategist Wang Meng took a part of his men with him. He surrendered to the Great Desolate Army. Wang Tianmong became famous. His fame even surpassed that of the Great Desolate Army. There was a faint title of the strongest force in the Central Plains. Meanwhile, the Great Desolate Army relied on recruiting troops and others to join. Their number exceeded 10,000 for the first time. When Yan was now 24 years old, the first real pipeline was built. The concept of the factory was born. The first bank was opened by the Great Desolate Army. with further increase in productivity. The Great Desolate Army further expanded its army. The number rose to 20,000. At the end of the year, the most important and critical event of the year was announced by Yen herself. The Institute of Transcendental Research was established again. The first batch of personnel was 100 people. The president was Yen herself. Information that had been sealed since the era of Qi was opened again. A corpse of a transcendent inside the royal tomb was also once again open for study. Since then, the focus of the Great Desolate Army began to shift. If you like our video, please consider subscribe to our channel and like the video. This will motivate us to create more videos. Please give your feedback in the comments. I'll try to reach out and answer every comment.